Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 15, 2011 meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority and the Edina City Council. Ms. Bennerat, roll call, please.
Member Bennett.
Here.
Member Brindle.
Here.
Member Sprague.
Here.
Member Swenson.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. For those of you in the audience, if you had a chance to review the agenda for this evening, you will notice that there were certain items marked with an asterisk. Those are items handled on a single motion basis as consent agenda items. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, Your Honor.
Member Bennett.
I would like to remove item 4E, please.
4E is removed. With the exception of 4E, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda?
Mayor, I'd like to remove item 4F, please.
All right. With the exception of 4E and 4F, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, we approve the consent agenda as stated. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. We have no Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority business this evening. We will first move into the public hearing phase of the agenda, and the first public hearing matter is a proposed ordinance change with regard to notice of hearing for conditional use permit. The area of notice is the issue.
Thank you, Mayor.
Director
Members
Teague.
of the council, a few meetings back, the council directed staff to draft the ordinance that's before you this evening. And what it is an ordinance that reduces the notification requirement for certain conditional use permits. That is anyone who's requesting a conditional use permit for an addition to an existing home or a new home where the new first floor elevation exceeds the existing first floor elevation by more than a foot. With all conditional use permits, the notification requirement is 1,000 feet. And the ordinance before you would reduce that notification only in that instance for that one type of conditional use permit from 1,000 feet to 350 feet. The idea behind that is that that type of a conditional use permit is more similar to a variance review where the notification requirement is 200 feet. State statute requires the minimum notification for conditional use permit of 350 feet. So that's the ordinance that is before you. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their February meeting, and they unanimously are recommending approval. If the council is agreeable to the language before you, staff would recommend that you waive waive second reading and adopt the ordinance. With that, I'll turn it over to the Mayor and Council.
Very good. Questions for Director Teague? Member Bennett.
Yes, Director Teague, in what instances are those CUPs, will those CUPs, conditional use permits, be sought?
Only in the instance where a house is torn down and a new home built, or in addition to an existing home where the new first floor elevation of that addition or new home exceeds the first floor elevation of the existing home. So it's only for a single family home or a duplex.
And is there an underlying condition or conditions that will make a homeowner or property owner seek that CUP?
Correct. There are a few instances when somebody can make that request. The first being that it's in a 100-year floodplain. The second being that it's within within the Edina water management plan. If there's a water issue that's been documented by a hydrologist, and there's some specific language there. So it's only in those instances can you make that conditional use permit request.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Director Teague at this point in time? I'm going to open this up as a public hearing matter. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward and inquire or comment regarding this proposed ordinance change? Hearing no one and seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded, we close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Do we have a motion regarding this matter that would include waiver of second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, we adopt ordinance 2011-03 in its amended form with a waiver of second reading. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Brindle.
Aye.
Member Sprague.
Aye.
Member Swenson.
Aye.
Member Bennett.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks for some good staff work on that. And the next public hearing, and the last public hearing we have in this portion of the agenda, deals with a request for having a number of dogs outside of the present scope of the ordinance. The family would like to have 5 dogs approved for residents at 523 Coventry Lane. Chief Long, I believe you have this matter.
Is it adjustable for short people? Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, the homeowner at 523 Coventry Lane has applied for a pet permit to exceed the ordinance, which allows a aggregate of 3 dogs or cats combined. This came before the council on January 6th of 2009, and the permit was denied for a variety of different reasons. We had strong opposition at that council meeting, and we also have a strong opposition at this point based on the response of the notification we sent out to homeowners within 200 feet. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Animal Control Officer Tim Hunter, that is much more familiar with the situation in the ordinance.
Thank you, Chief. Officer Hunter.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm prepared to answer any questions that you might have on the subject. We've received it, and I think we forwarded a packet to you.
And do you have some background information you want to give us? Have you done some investigating?
As Chief Long had indicated, the applicant had made an application in 2009, and it was turned down at that time for a number of reasons. We haven't seen any changes in the area. It's still a high-density housing area. It's in the Coventry townhome development, and that hasn't changed. When we sent out the notification to the houses within 200 feet of the residence, we did receive a number of responses both by email and by phone. The responses we received were all in opposition to the application. They all cited similar reasons, concerns over noise, the behavior of the dogs, possibly encountering them, as well as just the close proximity of all the neighbors to one another. Many of the responses had indicated that they felt that the 3-pet limit that's currently in ordinance was adequate and that a variance wouldn't be applicable to that particular housing development. So I think overall, at the end of the day, I think this is not so much a matter of whether or not any one individual is at question so much as whether or not a variance would be applicable to that particular area.
Officer Hunter, do you have any public health and safety concerns, and if so, what are they?
Well, I think in any condition, whenever you're looking at exceeding this sort of an ordinance, you're looking at concerns about whether or not you have adequate care and of the animals, as well as cleaning up after the animals if they're allowed to use the outdoors for going to the bathroom and so forth. Obviously, interior maintenance of the residence is a concern, as well as any effect that may or may not have on the residents. In this particular case, there's also an indication of the resident wanting to train the animals for agility purposes, which is a time-consuming, although an admirable effort to keep the animals exercised and so forth, but it does require a time dedication as well as a facility dedication in terms of needing an area to exercise and train the animals for that activity. And I'm somewhat at question as to whether or not the area down at the Coventry actually affords enough room to be able to develop such an adequate facility to be able to train the animals. Not that that couldn't be taken care of off-site, but those are some of the concerns that we do have.
All right. It was unclear to me whether there were 5 dogs present at 523 Coventry Lane right now, or whether they want to have 5.
Currently, my understanding is that there are 3 dogs on premises. They are the current pets of the applicant, and they are seeking permission to get 2 additional ones, anticipating retirement of 2 of the existing dogs from the agility circuit, and there's a ramp-up time in terms of training and so forth. So they want to be able to prepare for that, so that when the 2 retire, that they have 2 prepared.
Okay.
So they do not currently have the 2 additionals.
Thank you. Member Brindle and then Member Swenson.
Thank you for that. And how many responses of opposition have you received?
We've received a total of 14, I believe, although we've only submitted 13 of them since one of them was an anonymous response.
Okay,
So I wasn't able to ascertain whether or not that had been a duplicate or not. So I
Okay.
figured, although we received 14 responses, we'd throw the anonymous one out.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Member Swenson.
Have you had a complaint since he was turned down the last time about his dogs that you've gone out to, other than now this request for 2 additional dogs?
Yeah, we did have a call for service. One of the neighbors indicated that there were cats at the residence again. When I stopped and chatted with the resident, they did indicate that they had turned their cats previously that had been in excess of the 3 pets. They had turned ownership of those over to a friend who would frequently bring them over for visitation. So it appeared as though that their friend had simply brought the cats over for visitation. So I had no reason to suspect that they were still in permanent residence at that address. So.
All right,
Okay.
thanks, Officer Hunter.
I had one other question.
Yes, Member
And
Swenson.
the copies of the letters of opposition, I don't have any of those in my packet. Do you guys have those?
No.
Okay.
No, but the copies of the emails I do not believe were forwarded to the council. I do have one packet with me if you'd like those to review, although.
They should probably be submitted for the record, if
Okay.
that would work for you.
Member Bennett.
Officer Hunter, are the garage facilities at the Coventry Townhomes single unit? Each resident or residence has their own separate garage facility, or are the garage facilities joined or shared?
My understanding is that that's a common area for the Coventry. I believe if any of the residents are here to speak in terms of their either support or opposition of the applicant, they can speak to that, as well as the applicant can also speak to that to be certain. But I believe that that's a common area. And we have had a complaint previously, prior to the 09 application, where one of the residents who is in opposition of the application had encountered the dogs in a less than favorable fashion.
Yeah, I believe it's common underground parking with just marked stalls like you'd have in a parking ramp. Other questions for Officer Hunter at this point in time? All right, thank you. Stand by. We may have some other questions when we proceed here with the public hearing.
Okay.
All right,
you.
thank you. Would the proponent please come forward, Mr. Carlson and maybe Ms. Horner, or whoever prefers to speak to this matter? Welcome, Mr. Carlson. I remember when you were here in 2009, you had beautiful portraits of your dogs with you, and we know that you're an ardent dog lover. So,
They're very fine animals. They're a credit to Edina.
all right, and let's hear from you as to why you think you deserve some exception to the ordinance,
Okay.
or why you should be an exception to the ordinance.
Good evening, council members and Mayor Hovland. I'm Wayne Carlson, live at 523 Coventry Lane, and I'm asking for a variance on the pet ordinance to have 5 animals based on my physical health, mental and physical, and also the prestige that having championship dogs bring to the city of Edina. A number of years ago, I was involved in a traffic accident, and the result was that I couldn't play handball or racquetball anymore. And so I was looking around for things to do and couldn't find anything. I gained a lot of weight, 40 to 50 pounds. I had pains in my legs. I had the dogs in the house, and I decided, well, I think I'll go train them for obedience. Once I got in the training center, I saw all these people doing agility, and I thought maybe this is a good way that I could get my health back and get my weight down and so forth. And what happened is when we started doing this, we were very, very successful at it. The Chinese crested here I've got has a catch 1 in CPE. He's the only Chinese crest in the country that's achieved that level of competence. The Pomeranian that I have has got a catch 2. She's the only Pomeranian in the country that's achieved that level of competency. The Gypsy has a catch 1 in CP also. The results from this is I've lost 50 pounds, my cholesterol, my triglycerides, my blood pressure has all gone down to great benefit. I had a physical lately for insurance purpose. They removed my rating from $800 a month to $390 a month. The problem is that these dogs are 8, 9, 10 years old, and they get into the age of retirement. Gypsy's probably to the point of being, almost to the point of being retired now. She doesn't perform that well occasionally. And I don't want to have to euthanize the dog to get other dogs. The problem is it takes 3 to 4 years to get the dogs trained to be able to perform. I'm 67 years old, and the time is running out, and I need to get it started so I'll have something when these people retired. The objections we've had is the feces issues. The dogs here are right now are maximum of 26 pounds. With a new dog, be 32. They're probably 1/3 the size of a Labrador and produce that much feces. The noise, I've trained these dogs to start barking on command. I haven't trained them to not bark because in our area, in the 13 townhouses, right now 6 of them are vacant. Last year, there's people breaking into the unit next door. They barked and we drove them off. So I don't want them to stop barking because their barking is good, but I have trained them to stop barking on command. So the noise issue is relatively modest. The medical, last year, last time I was here, one of the council members said, probably only if you had medical reasons. I do have a prescription from the VA medical hospital that this is a good thing for my medical conditions. Last time I was in here, everyone said that all my neighbors were objecting. So this year I went out and got a petition signed by all the people around me. 22 of 29 people closest to me have signed on this position that they're in favor of my position. 6 of the houses next to me have all gone on record. The people across the street have gone on record in favor of my petition. 60% to 70% of the people in our neighborhood own pets. Most of the people in our neighborhood are there less than 100 days a year. Right now, there's 6 units out of 13 that are vacant. I have had one owner next to me who is afraid of my dogs and has reported me to the city and to the town-owned association for having vicious dogs. A year and a half ago, the town owner president came up to me and apologized and said she finally realized there's no way that these little dogs could be vicious and be on a national and a local and performing at state fair if they were vicious and had problems adjusting to people. And it's just an issue of being fearful of animals. So I'm asking for a variance so that I can have 5 animals. I think the city of Edina can have the prestige of having champion animals and someone that trains really good animals. And I think that probably Edina finds it in best interest that we try to maintain our health. I provided you a prescription from the VA. I provided you a listing of all the people that have signed on to my petition. And I've also given you a positive resolution to look at as an alternative to the one that was provided on the staff report and the negativity of that report. I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I hope that you will go along with my request.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
And if you have any questions?
Anyone have questions for Mr. Carlson at this point in time?
Yeah.
Member Swenson.
There was some discussion about the common garage area that you share with your neighbors. Do you train there, or do you train your dogs solely at a training facility?
I train at training centers. I go to Twin City. I train at Agile Canines. I train at Bloomington Training Center. There's a number of centers that I train at, and we compete 2 to 3 weekends a month.
Do you use that common garage space for anything other than getting the dogs in and out of the car? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. This is a public hearing. And if there is anyone that wishes to come forward and testify regarding this matter, please feel free to come forward. Yes, ma'am. And as you heard at the beginning, you will have 3 minutes. You will get a yellow caution light when you have 30 seconds left, so you should wrap up at that point in time.
Thank you. I think, did you all get a copy of the letter? And I'll just read it briefly, quickly.
Would you identify yourself and your address?
My name is Tammy Newstrom. I'm a friend of Wayne Carlson's.
And your address?
1025 Central Avenue, St. Paul.
All right.
Okay. So it says, Dear Mayor and City Council members, I am writing on behalf of Wayne Carlson. For more than 3 years, Wayne and I have trained and trialed together in the sport of dog agility. Wayne and his dogs have received numerous titles for their performances in a variety of venues, including the American Kennel Club and the North American Dog Agility Council. His achievements are a result of his exemplary care and affection for his dogs. Agility is a team sport that requires superior skills at recalling and directing dogs through obstacle courses at fast speeds. It is one of the utmost importance that the dogs are physically sound, physically, mentally, and emotionally to compete and thrive in this sport. Wayne takes wonderful care of his dogs, always putting their safety, health, and well-being first and foremost. Wayne's dogs are responsive, obedient, and calm both in and outside the competitive arena. Wayne is also very considerate of how his dogs interact with other dogs and handlers. I strongly urge you to consider Wayne's superior stewardship of his loving animals in your decision. Respectfully submitted, Nancy Haley. And I know that he does train with Nancy. Also, I am the person that does have their cats, so he has 3 dogs. I've had the opportunity to watch Wayne train and watch his dogs compete. They are in no way vicious at all. They're very, very well cared for animals. And I think that he's done a remarkable job. He's got away with these animals. I see him do it with some of his neighbors' animals, and he does a really good job with them. And I think that anything that you would be willing to consider would be great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Vicki Handler. Address is 500 Indian Hill Road, Chanhassen, Minnesota 55317. I am the daughter of Seymour and Patty Handler. They are the direct neighbors of Mr. Carlson and his wife to the north. They share a common wall, and they share the common garage area that we've been discussing. They are currently in Arizona, where they winter every year, as Mr. Carlson knows, and are therefore unable to appear, and so I'm here on their behalf. They would like to object to Mr. Carlson's request for a variance, as they did 2 years ago, again, when I was here on their behalf. They first want me to let you know that they are not animal haters. They are actually babysitting my sister's dog in a couple of weeks, so they're not at all fearful of animals or dogs. However, since the decision 2 years ago, they continue to have problems with Mr. Carlson's animals. Specifically, my mother has been accosted by them in the shared garage area. It is an open area. She, from me to the council, is about the distance between his garage space and my parents' garage space. She has specifically told Mr. Carlson that in her fear, she has said to him, it is the law, you must have them on a leash, and he has defiantly said he will not leash them. So in response, she's had to very slowly open the garage door before she gets into the garage area because she's afraid she's going to be attacked by the 3 dogs. I know they look like small dogs, but they've jumped on her before. They've growled, they've bared their teeth. Who knows what they're going to do? She's also heard some barking. So, again, they respectfully request that the council deny Mr. Carlson's petition. 3 dogs have got to be adequate. Nobody's disagreeing that his dogs are not wonderful, champion, agile dogs, but they do not belong, or at least more than 3, do not belong in a multifamily situation with limited green space and lots of common shared space. By the way, they're 80 and 81, so their health is also at risk. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Handler. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening, council members, mayor. My name is Scott Edstrom. I live at 305 Coventry. I live a block away from Mr. Carlson and his dogs. I do believe that his dogs are well behaved. We don't hear them very often, don't hear them at all. As a matter of fact, we don't see them very much. But I'm not here to support his exception. I, as a homeowner, am very concerned that if we support this exception, that'll set a precedence for other people to request exceptions within that environment, and we may not get dogs that are as behaved and well-trained as Mr. Carlson's dogs are. So that concerns me, that we would be setting a precedent that would not be a good thing for our area. There is a common area. There's not much room in front of the houses. It's all open, and maybe we've got 10 to 15 feet a yard. You've got a separate patio for everybody who is fenced off that might be 30 feet by 20 feet. And then there's some common area back behind some of the townhomes for areas of exercise. So I would just ask you to consider that the precedent we might be setting could be a little dangerous for our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edstrom. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Janet Bohan, 800 Coventry Place, Edina. I'm one of the ones who wrote a letter in opposition to this request. Everything about what's been said by Mr. Edstrom or Seymour's daughter has been said, but my concern is also for the precedent or the opening for the city of Edina. I don't think you can make one exception for one citizen for the entire city. And I would think that there would be concern by other citizens that allowing 5 dogs in one residence is, in my mind, rather extreme. And I think that that would be shared by a number of people. So that's my expression.
Thank you, Ms. Bohan. Anyone else? Hearing nothing and seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Moved and seconded, we close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Any other questions for staff? All right. Does someone care to make a motion so we can have a discussion?
I would move to deny the request.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion?
The petitioner talks about basically medical necessity. There's a note from the doctor, but what it's talking about is having, his being able to carry out an active lifestyle. I would hope when this ordinance was drafted, they considered that and looked at the number of 3 and thought maybe 3 is satisfactory to help people, most people meet an active lifestyle. I think in this case, 3 is enough to help the petitioner maintain an active lifestyle, and there's no reason to detract from that standard for that reason. The other thing is that was brought up by petitioner was about champion breeding. There is provision in the ordinance for licensed or permitted, commercial kennels. And I think that if we wanted to allow champion breeding, that was an important paramount community value. We would change the ordinance to account for that, but we haven't. And I think that's another reason to deny it in this case. The provision allowing for that is in permitted commercial kennels.
Other comments? Member Brindle?
My comment just is in respect to the beauty of the area, both in the fact that this is a multi-housing area, and it's high-density housing, and to have 5 dogs in one unit just seems to me to be, being familiar with the units, seems to me that they take a lot of space. They need a lot of space, and one of the advantages of this area is that it is very efficiently, the housing is very efficiently laid out. But I don't know how you do 5 dogs in there. So I have to deny it just because I think that the density for housing is too high.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
My single word is balance, and I think that as a body, we are called upon to balance the rights and interests of our residents with each other, with the businesses that operate in the city. I think our staff, our police department, our code is all we all are charged with that responsibility. And in this instance, I think that balance was reached with a code that set a limit of 3 pets per household. I think it has been a workable balance again, and I would uphold the code and deny the request.
Thank you, Member Bennett. Member Swenson, any comment?
I have no change in what's been said.
From 2009, you mean? Yeah. All right. Manager Neal.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if there is an inclination on the council to not grant the request, then we will want to ask the city attorney to draft findings before you take final action. Correct?
Correct. All right, so what would be the course of action this evening?
You could do one of two things. You could now move to table the motion that's been made, or you could move to amend and direct the city attorney to prepare findings of fact consistent with denial.
So amended.
Yeah.
So amended.
Okay. And you vote on the amendment?
All right. Just one other comment. Mr. Carlson, I think, all of us other than Mr. Sprague, I believe, were here in 2009 when you came forward before. I don't think anybody doubts your earnestness or sincerity about your love of animals and what they've done for you. But I think as Member Bennett has stated, it's all about balance. And when we balance your desires against the rights of your your fellow residents, and think about the community in general, while there may be a basis in rare occasion or on rare occasion to grant an exception, I also do not see that situation prevailing here. So I would also concur with my colleagues with regard to the proposed denial. So we've got a motion to amend the original motion. We need to vote on the amendment first. And the motion to amend involved adopting findings, directing the city attorney to prepare findings consistent with the denial of the request. All those in favor of adopting the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Granted. Approved.
You have to vote on the main motion now.
Yeah, now we have to vote on the main motion. So now, the main motion was to deny the request for a pet application.
It has been amended, so the amendment passed. Now you vote on the main motion, which is the same as the amendment, but under Roberts, that's how it's done.
All right.
So clear as mud?
Clear as mud? Yeah, all right. All those in favor of the motion say aye. 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 Opposed, say nay. Carried. Glad you clarified that. I thought we were going to be going a different direction on the main motion, so. All right. We are now into the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. And the first matter before us is a matter that we continued from February 15, 2011, and that's a discussion regarding the street reconstruction project for the Gulf Terrace neighborhood, Resolution 2011-13. Mr. Sullivan, you've done a lot of work, I think, and interacted with neighbors in that broad neighborhood since February 15th, and you're coming back to us at this point in time with another report and a recommendation, I assume.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. You will see in your revised packet an updated staff report, feasibility study, as well as some correspondence from some of the neighbors leading up to this meeting this evening. I will be certainly giving an update of the continuation from January 18th and what information we found since then and our proposed path moving forward here. At the January 18th public hearing, staff recommended a street reconstruction program for this neighborhood, which was to reconstruct all the streets in the neighborhood and to add barrier style, the B618 curb and gutter in the north half of the neighborhood. Our proposed reconstruction would have narrowed up some of the intersections, reducing our hard surface or impervious surface in the neighborhood slightly by 0.04 of an acre, about 1% of the total pavement in the neighborhood. This proposed reconstruction project met the watershed, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District requirements. However, during the public hearing phase, a number of residents spoke on the water quality of Harvey Lake. They were concerned with some of the pollutant loading, some of the degradation of the lake over the last number of years. The graphic up before you is shows the drainage boundaries or the drainage area to Lake Harvey, the purple shaded area. Pollutant loading to Lake Harvey is done by a number of ways. Stormwater runoff that takes organic material, grass clippings, leaves, different fertilizers off the yards and eventually into the lake, or more of the heavy metals would come off a driveway or a roadway surface, brake linings, things like that that you would typically get. So all these things contribute to the loading of the lake, the phosphorus levels, the different organic material, and heavy metals that would accumulate in the lake. City Council had, I guess, closed the public hearing but suspended conclusion of the overall decision that evening so that staff can meet with the watershed district and talk about options for improving the water quality of Harvey Lake. Staff sat down with the watershed and brainstormed of all the different options that may be available for this region. As you can kind of see in the graphic previously, we were looking at areas that we could do work within the public right-of-way. There is not a lot of public land. There's 30 acres or so that drains to the lake. There's about 4 acres or so that's actually public right-of-way. Most of that's within the street and hard surface itself. However, we sat down with the watershed, looked at 6 main options for this water body. The first one we looked at was filtration swales. We looked at some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks of all these different options. And filtration swales are similar to rain gardens, we'll talk about in a second, that would capture some of this runoff and filter it horizontally before it made its way to the lake. It's a great way to capture sediment, like I said, the leaves, grass clippings, pollutant loading like phosphorus, things like that. However, they're typically pretty expensive to install initially, got some soil corrections that are needed. In addition, high maintenance costs associated with these. Usually they're planted in native type grasses, but however, these grasses have to be cared for until they are fully grown, and then also seasonally have to be taken care of. And these filtration areas only can treat small areas at a time. So location of these is critical in how much area they can actually treat. But it was an option that the watershed and staff both agreed, something we should progress with further. Secondly, we looked at rain gardens. Rain gardens were talked about in great detail at the January 18th meeting about could rain gardens be installed in this neighborhood. And we looked at rain gardens within the city right-of-way. And here again, they're able to capture those pollutants before they make its way to the lake. However, with rain gardens, you need a vertical separation from the lake level to the street. And in this case, we only have about 1.5 feet to 2 feet from the street elevation to the lake level around Lake Harvey. Rain gardens need a 3-foot separation. They're also expensive and some soil corrections to install, require maintenance activities, and here again can only treat small areas. But the real key thing is that we don't have the vertical separation necessary. The water table of Lake Harvey is not going to change. It's going to be high. It's something that is not going to change in any scenario in the future. So we really believe with the watershed's agreement here that this is not a viable option. We then looked at shoreline restoration and buffers. It's something that the watershed has a lot of interest and a lot of techniques that they've been doing in the last couple of years around the community, mostly upstream, but we'll be looking to do some more within the city of Edina. This is these shoreline restorations and buffers. First thing is the shoreline buffer would prevent the water runoff from the homes, from the yards, would capture and screen some of that grass clippings, again, phosphorus, the fertilizers, dog and cat feces, things like that before they made its way to the lake. And then also by bolstering the shoreline, you would be preventing the shoreline wave erosion that may occur, sedimentation that would happen from that. These are somewhat high maintenance until they're established. Like with all these methods, it's a native plant type material. It would take some time to to fully establish themselves, and it reduces your yard spaces. Watershed's recommended about a 20-foot band along the shoreline. That's a pretty substantial width, so it would reduce the usable space in most of the yards. But it is something that, like I said, staff and Watershed agreed was something that could be done on this site potentially, and so we wanted to take a little more in-depth look at this. Fourth option that was looked at was stormwater treatment devices. This is the grit chambers, the hydraulic separators, the different devices that we've used in other projects in the past. They're the concrete manhole type devices, the mechanical. They're great at removing sedimentation, suspended solids, your soils, oils, floatable materials, cigarette butts, pop bottles, things like that from the water column. And by getting these into a pipe network, you're not allowing you're preventing overland flow, which would erode a bank away. But they're expensive. They range between $20,000 and $40,000 per structure, and there'd be multiple structures. But really, here again, the real reason why this option wasn't moved forward is the fact that we don't have that vertical separation again between the road surface itself, the necessary vertical separation between the road surface and the lake. These work on hydraulics, and they need grade to work. They need these things would actually be submerged and really wouldn't be effective for the measures. Excuse me. We also looked at pervious pavements. This was also discussed extensively at the January meeting. Pervious pavements, either in concrete or asphalt, looks like a Rice Krispie. As a raindrop falls on the surface, it would actually infiltrates through vertically and works its way down to the subsoils. These are great for reducing runoff again to the lake and preventing shoreline erosion, because that water is no longer running off the street, it's running through the street vertically. However, here again, it has some of the same drawbacks as some of the other options. They're expensive initially to install, high maintenance costs. You actually have to have specialized equipment, glorified vacuum cleaners that would actually vacuum the top quarter-inch of the pavement. Pretty expensive equipment. And then you need the vertical separation from the groundwater table again. These are watershed requirements, and we don't have that 3 foot of vertical separation again. So this was something that was ruled out as well. And the last option that was looked at was pond dredging. This is a way to, we've done it in some other parts of our community, to reduce the internal phosphorus loading of the lake and may improve short-term water quality. However, long-term, it has a number of drawbacks, and the first and foremost is they're very expensive to do, and you haven't solved the external loading problem. You've cleaned up the lake itself, but you're still getting that runoff that's getting to the lake, and you're just going to rebuild that same phosphorus loading, that same organic loading to the lake again. And talking with the watershed, they will not permit. They basically flat out told us they will not allow us to permit a pond dredging within the city of Edina for this type of activity. So that was also kind of ruled out. So we took these 6 options and pared them down to 2 options that we brought forward to the neighborhood. We had a meeting February 22nd where we invited all the residents back in to talk about our findings, what the watershed recommended, what staff was able to come up with for some proposals as well. And we shared that information with the residents. However, at that meeting, we heard some additional comments circulating around curb and gutter, the use of curb and gutter. Is it necessary? What type of curb and gutter? Those type of things. And staff has shared some of these, benefits of curb and gutter with council as well as all the other projects since 2005 when we installed the current assessment policy. We believe it's a cost-effective measure. You're reducing the pavement that's accessible to residents by about 3 feet per foot of roadway, so a huge savings in the accessible portion of a project. It bookends the pavement. It really helps us to control drainage as we're trying to direct water to these type of filtration basins and things like this. We can control the water. It allows us a good edge to street sweep against, snow plow up against, really beneficial in our maintenance activities, and protects sod, irrigation systems, and other types of streetscape items that may be in yards by having that vertical face curb. I got a graphic here that shows about the streets in blue are the streets that do not have curb and gutter within our communities. 13% of the roads do not have curb and gutter at this time. So we talked a little bit about the recommendations, or we have 3 recommendations. The January 18th recommendations we've already talked a little bit in detail and kind of summarized. The current recommendation, what we've learned from the watershed, what we've learned from the residents at the February 22nd meeting, has some modifications to it here, and then a final no-build scenario, which I guess it's always an option on any project, is to suspend this project and move on and move forward. The current recommendation would be to narrow up Lakeview Drive, and this is the section of Lakeview Drive immediately adjacent to the north side of Harvey Lake. Reduce it from a 26-foot wide roadway down to an 18-foot wide roadway. This would allow room for infiltration basins that we talked about. These infiltration basins we placed along this corridor in order to get that filtration and some treatment for approximately about 3 to 4 acres of area. By reducing the intersection, by reducing the whole roadway width down, the westerly intersection here would also be squared up considerably, and you can see all the pavement that would be removed from the project. This very dedicated T intersection would slow traffic volumes and even deter potentially some traffic to use Gulf Terrace and stay off of Lakeview Drive, which was, I guess, a concern we heard a lot of from residents, is that's a very nice walking area, and they're concerned about the walking pedestrians mixed in with the vehicular traffic. We'd also do the same thing on the east end, where we'd redirect the intersection, reconfigure a little bit to make the north-south movement the more dedicated movement, allowing the movement to the west along Lakeview to be more of a dedicated movement just for those individuals that would be needing to use that roadway. So we'd narrow up the roadway to 18 feet and allow us room to add these filtration swales. We're still finalizing the location of them and the size. We're trying to maximize the area that we can treat and maximize our filtration capabilities. And then something else we're recommending or encouraging is that the residents look to do shoreline restoration and buffers. Now, this is on private property, so this is not something the City of Edina would take part in, but it's something that we would help facilitate through the watershed. Watershed has a real good program for this. They have a grant program where they actually share, in most cases, 50% of the cost of these wetland buffers. The photo in the lower left corner is the wetland buffer. It's vegetated there with some native type plantings. The photo in the upper right is what the filtration swale may look like after it's starting to get up to full speed, so to speak. The filtration swale, we had expected that's going to cost about $15,000 or $20,000 to install. That would come out of the storm sewer fund, so it would not be an accessible cost to residents. It would come out of the storm sewer fund itself and would actually reduce the accessible cost for the project somewhat because we've narrowed up the roadway. And then obviously I guess we should always talk about the no-build scenarios. If council determines tonight not to move forward with the project, what would happen out there? And with all of our projects, the Public Works Department and Maintenance Department is always maintaining these roadways. However, as the roadway ages and as the age increases, our maintenance costs will also increase. We'll do pothole patching or skim patching. We'll keep the road from having the potholes, but we won't be able to do a lot more than that financially. Snow plowing, as we move forward, we're recommending from a staff perspective that we don't install snow plow stakes. This is a time and labor intensive process. We do both spring and fall, and it's really there to keep the sod and from being disturbed during a snow plow event. These are very curvilinear streets up there, and we feel that the curb and gutter would do just that. So we believe that looking to remove snow stakes in this area. And if it was to be postponed or suspended, we're talking 10 plus years on a suspension. At this point, we're out 10 to 15 years on our street reconstruction program. We'd put this one at the bottom of the list. Quickly, I'll cover the project costs. Like I said, we're actually going to reduce the accessible portion by about $20,000 because of narrowing up the street. However, the storm sewer fund dollars would increase by about $15,000 to cover off on the filtration swales. So you can see some of the adjusted subtotals down there at the bottom. And then what does this do for the assessments? The assessments would not change. Like I said, because some of these numbers are kind of shifting categories a little bit, and the fact that we actually found two parcel owners that were not properly notified of the public hearing, we had to remove those from the assessment roll. So it's basically a wash. The $12,500 amount that we estimated at the January 18th meeting would still be consistent this evening. Quickly, the schedule. We're here. City Council action is continued till tonight. We would start construction on this project if Council was to award it in probably early June. I'm guessing we'd like to start probably just before school got out and actually work on the north half first, and then wait till school was fully out, and then start working on the southern streets as our staging progresses to the south through the summer. Wrap up in the fall and final assessment hearing next year. Staff believes that either the January 18th recommendation or the revised recommendation that has the filtration swales and the narrowing of Lakeview Drive, both options would be acceptable, and to staff, we believe it's necessary, cost-effective, and feasible for the infrastructure of this neighborhood, and we're recommending authorization of BA 355. With me, I have Jesse Struve, the city utility engineer, myself, and Director Houle. The three of us can answer any questions you may have.
Member Swenson. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thanks for the presentation, Jack. The parking on Lakeview, would we then at 18 feet allow parking on one side or parking not allowed on either side?
The recommendation of staff would to not allow parking on the lake side, but to allow it on the north side or the home side.
Okay.
I guess it'd be the westbound direction.
Okay. And since we've put off this decision until tonight on this project, are you concerned at all about the bid environment? We just got an excellent bid for the Ridge Road project. Are we still in an okay environment for bidding?
We do believe so. We've met with a number of contractors through this most recent bid award that's will be coming later this evening, and they are still hungry for work, still looking at keeping good prices. So we feel confident that we'll have a good bid environment for this one as well.
Thank you.
Member Bennett.
Oh. Mr. Sullivan, those of us who were able to be at the NEMO workshop, which was held subsequent to the first hearing of this matter, had a very good discussion with your follow-up tonight about the different things that can be used for water management. And one of the things that I took away from that meeting was that pervious pavements have limited applicability. And in fact, the communities that have used them have found that they don't work for roadways, they work for parking lots, but that the difficulties of cleaning them make them not even desirable for the entrance into the parking lot, but just the parking lot itself, which I think is real important information for our residents to understand as we consider this information in other contexts. So that was more of a comment than a question. But I do have a question regarding the potential for diversion of traffic from Lakeview Drive if it's reconstructed to that 18-foot width. We've had discussion about roadway width in a number of contexts recently, and we've talked about the importance of a 10-foot lane or a 11-foot wide lane. In this instance, what would be the anticipated width? What's the parking width required? I know what we deal with state aid roadways. I believe it's 8 feet is minimum for a state aid roadway.
That is correct.
For a parking
lanes in most cases are either 8 or 10 foot based on the vehicle volumes for a state aid roadway. Okay,
so with a body of water on the other side, we're narrowing our travel lane to 10 feet then?
Approximately 10 feet.
Okay, for two directional traffic, because we're not contemplating any one-way traffic restriction on this, correct? Okay.
I have walked that road almost every day of my life, and I don't know if I've actually ever seen a car parked on it, but I would assume that there might be an occasion that there was one that I maybe missed, but sure. It's not a high parking lot road. There are only 3 houses actually that face it directly, and one has parking spaces for about 5, if I remember correctly.
With the volume of that roadway relative to the roadways adjacent to it, and it's a relatively low-volume road, neighborhood compared to some of the neighborhoods that we've seen, although I know that traffic is a concern throughout the neighborhood. What are we anticipating for diversion from Lakeview Drive, and where is the traffic diverted anticipated to go?
There's about 300 cars a day that travel on that section of Lakeview Drive. We'd anticipate that some percentage, I would guess close to 50% or so, would divert to Gulf Terrace to the north. I think you're still going to have some amount of traffic that will use Lakeview Drive. It's, like you said, it's a nice street to walk on. It's a nice street to drive down because you can see the lake, playing hockey, maybe a couple weeks ago playing hockey out there. A couple more weeks you'll see some ducks and things like that out there. So I think we'll probably lose, of that 300 cars, maybe 150 or so move to the north. Gulf Terrace to the north has about 630 so cars a day on it. So you can see that maybe jumping to 750 or so, somewhere in that neighborhood. That'd be my anticipation.
Member Brindle.
Thank you for looking at some of the watershed options and some of the ideas for filtration around Lake Harvey. I know that when we discussed this in January, it would have been nice to make a decision at the time, but I really appreciate the time and the effort to learn about some of the other options. On one of the slides, it says the city can control 13% of the overall drainage area to the lake. How is that going to improve if you put curb and gutter in? I mean, can you possibly improve on that?
No, we can't. That was one of the slides that was presented at the February 22nd open house. And my recommendation or the reason for these slides was just to show the kind of the scale of the project. The drainage area of the lake is about 30 acres. Of that 30 acres, what percentage is actually lake itself that you obviously can't treat water that drops onto that? What percentage is private property? And what percentage does the city own that we can do something in, such as infiltration, rain gardens as filtration swales? And so the thought was, well, there's about 13% of the overall project that we actually physically own and can do something in. So it's more of anything just to show that the city has limited right-of-way to do improvement work. And so that's why we're going to this step of reducing the width of Lakeview Drive, trying to find more room to build something in, to find some type of treatment facility.
And that's really valuable information, because I think what it illustrates to the homeowners is that they really can make a difference. They can make a difference by changing what they do with their lawn and landscape, raking promptly to keep as many leaves out of the lake as possible, because leaves are phosphorus, keeping their grass clippings out of the lake because grass clippings are phosphorus, and also just to be really conscious of safe fertilizers in a lake area. And there's, I think, I don't live on a lake, so I don't have that information ready, but I'm sure there's information by the Lake Minnetonka Homeowners Association. They are very active and very concerned about the quality of their lake, and I'm sure there's information that can come from that can help this situation and inform homeowners of what they can do differently to improve the water quality in Lake Harvey. So those are my comments at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Brindle. Member Sprague.
Mr. Sullivan, looking at the 6 options, what, in your opinion, is the most effective treatment option for improving the water quality, without regard to cost or anything else?
Well, as we discussed with the residents in February, our filtration swales, they're going to be small, not going to treat a very large area. They're going to be an incremental improvement. They're going to be about 2 pounds of phosphorus a year. Our goal is to reduce about 67 pounds of phosphorus in our watershed through the Minnehaha Creek, and so this is 3% of that. Not a very big percentage, but it is a step in the right direction. You know, from a staff perspective, the combination of this filtration swale, doing what we can on city property, and then truly encouraging residents and helping to facilitate the communications between the watershed and the residents for these wetland buffers, lakeshore stabilization is really, as you can see by one of the graphics, there's 2/3 of the lake is buffered by private property. That's a bigger bang than our much smaller 150, 200-foot long filtration swale that we'll be able to produce on the north side of the lake. So I guess the short answer is the resident filtration buffers would really truly be the biggest bang for our buck. However, the staff cannot recommend that as a sole option. That's because of the private property.
With regard to bulkhead curb, I just want to clarify again that does bulkhead curb increase the flow or discharge of water to Lake Harvey?
It will not change the volume of water that makes it to Lake Harvey. It will allow us to better direct that flow so that we can treat it. We can either put it in a filtration swale, if that's a choice that the council decides to make tonight, or B, would allow us to get into a standard manhole and then discharge it to the lake at an elevation that does not promote erosion of the soil slope or the bank.
With regards to longevity, what's the difference between bulkhead and surmountable?
There's probably very little difference in the longevity of the two types of curb and gutter. I would say negligible difference.
So they will last the exact same amount of time?
I would say yes.
And what about the longevity of the pavement? Would that matter, bulkhead versus surmountable?
The key for us
would the pavement last shorter or longer using one of those techniques?
They would last longer with curb and gutter. The type of curb and gutter has less impact on that. However, I will state that a bulkhead curb does not allow a vehicle to easily drive up on or over the curb. A surmountable would still be fairly easy for a vehicle to drive up over the curb, creating potentially some pockets maybe behind the curb that would eventually fill with water and have some deterioration of the curb and the pavement from the backside, potentially. So I guess the short answer, surmountable curb probably has a little less lifespan when it comes to the street in aggregate because of that ability to drive up over it, especially as the spring thaw hits. We're going to be driving up on these mushy, wet portions of roadway or boulevards.
So did they just create additional maintenance, possible maintenance issues?
Correct, additional maintenance for staff.
I want to go back to traffic islands. Those were part of the original study. What was the rationale for why were they included? How did that come about and to be included into the plan?
At our initial open house meeting that we held with the residents, a resident brought up the landscape islands that they live in had lived in another part of the community that had those installed down by the Southdale Woodhill neighborhoods down along 66th Street there, and suggested that staff look at the viability of installing these within this neighborhood. Staff took that, had an additional meeting for some residents to attend to see if there was a lot of support for that, and have inserted them in based on some of our recommendations as well.
So just based on feedback, were they surveyed on the inclusion of the traffic islands, or was it more follow-up based on feedback?
It was not surveyed or a question of them. It was more just on some feedback and then staff recommendation as well. As a traffic calming, kind of the entrance island mentality of entering the neighborhood.
And what traffic data demonstrated to you a need for the traffic island improvement?
Certainly the volumes within the neighborhood are not excessive, so it would not have been the traffic volumes. The speed data, we'd heard from a number of individuals that kind of entering the neighborhood, that there's some higher speeds as they enter in. Kind of a combination of us tightening up the intersections as well as tightening up the entrances, we believe would kind of help to mitigate some of those volume that the speeds that we are hearing about in the neighborhood.
But would the traffic islands solve mid-block speeding, or is it simply the entry speeds, the turning speeds?
Mostly the turning speeds. Once you get past the islands and you get into the neighborhood, there need to be a different measure to control speeding through that section.
And what was the feedback, again, just for the record, from the public or the emergency vehicles feedback on the traffic islands?
Sure. We questioned or asked the police and fire responders and as well as the school bus garage to kind of give us some update as to what their thoughts were now that the one down on 70th and 66th has one. There's multiple down there have been installed. They recognize that they're a more dedicated movement for them. They take additional time. That time is relative. It's an additional second or two, but they can maneuver them. If they had their choice, I think they'd have a parking lot for an intersection, obviously for speeds and big turning ladder trucks, things like that. But they do recognize that they are that they do not negatively impact their operations.
Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Mr. Sullivan, I know the neighborhood has done a great deal of work on this, and they call it looking at the curb, no curb issue. I think it's really the bulkhead issue versus a surmountable issue. So I think they came to the conclusion they would prefer surmountable. And so would you tell us one more time why you think from an environmental standpoint, which is kind of the underlying reason that everyone's looking hard at this issue, why our staff thinks it's better environmentally to have the bulkhead curb as opposed to the surmountable?
Two things. I think from an environmental standpoint, we mentioned briefly that the surmountable curb allows you to drive up over it, which is still going to get into these boulevard areas that may degrade over time or will degrade over time. And secondly, from a staff perspective, since 2005, we've been communicating with the councils and the residents on different neighborhoods, and we've heard over and over again that bulkhead style curb is the style of curb that both council and staff are recommending moving forward with. A few years back we gave them the option, and I think it was talked about through a couple of different public hearings that we're no longer going to give them that option. So staff is kind of moving forward with the one singular type of curb and gutter.
Okay. With the addition of the filtration swales and the reduction in roadway width from 28 to 18 feet, Mr. Kaiser raised the issue, and I think appropriately so, with regard to pedestrian safety, because we do know that people love to walk around Lake Harvey, and very understandable as to why they do like that so much. What are your thoughts about putting people at greater risk with a narrowed roadway to accommodate the filtration swales? On balance, is it better to have the filtration swale versus a wider width for at least perceived or enhanced pedestrian safety?
From a staff perspective, we could live with either option. I guess I'll start with that. From a safety perspective, with the narrower street, traffic will be driving slower. This is a street that's similar to the width of Sunnyside west of Browndale. You can kind of get a gauge of that. Traffic will be driving slower. Traffic with some probably redirection of traffic, there'll be less volume of traffic out there. Those combination of two things should make that as equally as safe today, if not safer than it is, by reducing that width down.
Well, thanks for that comparative. That's my old street. So another question for you. You don't have a staff recommendation. You've got a January 18 recommendation. You've got a March 15 recommendation. Does staff have a preference here?
From a staff perspective, I think the January 18th proposals actually are preferred. The reason I state that is because although we want to make improvements to the water quality of Lake Harvey and all of our watershed, it's a small improvement. It's at the same time would be a maintenance issue for the city staff for the filtration swales, and believe that that I guess those two issues outweigh the secondary option. So from a staff perspective, we have I guess both plans meet the watershed. Both plans meet the intent of this community to reduce our hard surface, tighten up intersections, make more dedicated movements, get our necessary infrastructure improvements that we need. And that's, I guess the 18th is, if I had to recommend an option from staff, that would be our option.
Okay, Member Swenson and Member Bennett.
On the earlier proposal, if I am correct, you were going to put in those special stormwater treatment devices, but it sounds like now you've conferred with the depths, and that really isn't effective because you don't have enough depth. So you have the cost of those. Is it true you can't put in those? So if you're telling me you prefer the 18th, but those were in the plan for the 18th? Sure. Tell me what would happen if we went back to the 18th. Can those go in, or can they not go in?
The original recommendation from January 18th.
I think you had two of them.
Yes, we would not be able to install those. With this, we've realized that is something that cannot be installed. However, like I stated, we're still meeting the watershed requirements. We're still doing everything we can within the confines of the watershed to make improvements.
So if we want some sort of filtration device, it needs to be swales. Then we need an 18-foot wide. Can that 18-foot wide roadway be no parking on either side?
We could certainly, or I guess council could make that part of the conditions of this project. The reason why we recommended at least parking on the north side is that that is a long block, and if for some reason one of the homes mid-block needed additional parking.
Well, there is only one home mid-block that doesn't either front to the back to Golf Terrace or have this huge cutout in their driveway that has additional parking, so.
Then they would have a lengthier walk. But
right.
From a staff perspective, we could certainly, that could be part of the proposal if council recommended.
And there's one other intersection, that Lakeview Drive, it's sort of confusing. It's where Golf Terrace tees into Lakeview Drive before it makes the little move out to the frontage road. Have you tightened that one up at all? Because I know you talked about putting a divider in to remind people to go slower, but that's the one that the other day I had to laugh after we'd had the discussion, and it was our one warm day, I think, in January, and I was walking in, and I saw someone come sailing through there. I mean, I thought maybe they'd make the water with the speed they were going, and it was sort of interesting just because it's an open intersection. So I can't tell from your drawing whether you've squared that up at all. It's the northwest corner curb that needs to be squared.
Yeah, that intersection is excessively large.
Mm-hmm.
It will be reduced to less than half of what it is today. That'll be a more dedicated, true T intersection where you'll have to come to a complete stop at that stop sign, make the dedicated
That would
left
make
or
it much
dedicated
safer.
right. And if you're heading out of the neighborhood, you can't just make that big sweeping turn.
Right.
You'll have to make the slower dedicated movement as well. So
Okay.
yes, that's some of that 0.04 acres of reduction.
Okay. And then we got a letter from someone who hadn't originally been I take it he isn't in the list of people that would be assessed for this project. You said you had two people that had not been noticed. Is he one of them?
Yeah, Mr. Kaiser is one of those individuals. The other
He's
homeowner will be-
4702,
Yes,
I think?
4702
Okay.
Golf Terrace. That was an oversight on staff's part. They were not part of the original notification during the open house process. Early on when you're doing this type of work, you don't necessarily know your exact limits. You're working in more generalities, broad strokes. And as we refined the design, we wanted to incorporate that home and another home to get a good tie-in locations. However, we did not notify them of the public hearing, therefore we cannot
Okay.
assess them of the 429.
I assumed that was who you're talking about, but I just wanted to get that
Correct.
on record. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, could you please put a map under the camera? I'd like to see more clearly what intersection it is that Councilmember Swenson was referring to, and then I have a couple of questions that would...
I don't have it blown up right, but it is this intersection here.
Is that the inter-
So the
Okay.
frontage road.
Yeah, he knew what I was saying.
Okay.
Yep. Frontage road is, Wilson frontage road is right here, and then it's this Lakeview. It's this intersection right here. It will be reduced almost in half. And we are bringing the sidewalk, if you can zoom in a little bit for me, Marty. We are bringing, it's very difficult to see on this scale, but we're bringing the sidewalk all the way in to the intersection as well at the stop sign.
Can you please back up and show Wind Road as well? I have a question about the two, or does this, no, this map doesn't show
This
Wind
map
Road.
doesn't show
Okay,
Wind Road.
well, we can continue that, let's see. Great, perfect, okay. Showing the intersection that you just showed and Wind Road, I note that both of those come to an approximate T, and with the modification to the intersection on the north, that you will be bringing them. It's my understanding that the islands that were installed on Cornelia and West Shore Drive, just north of 70th Street, are both at the entrance to a street that is in fact multiple blocks long, not simply a block long?
That is correct. The ones on both 66th Street and 70th are more for the north-south streets, the Cornelia, those type of streets and not on a much shorter section of roadway. Staff recommended this one here because it is the other flanker to the one to the north. Also, there was some discussion this may be kind of an area where parents drive through to drop off kids down for the school to avoid the south view. And quite honestly, it's city right away. We have the ability to go a little bit wider with the street there. You can see we have to widen the street out just slightly. We have the room to do it there, where we don't have it in some other parts of the neighborhood.
Sure, and I'd like to ask about width, but before I do that, you said that you identified in answer to Member Sprague's question the benefit, since there is not excessive volume. I am not taking lightly residents' concerns, but we have heard a lot about volume throughout the city over the past few years, and we have some understanding of how those relative values are, what the relative volumes are in different neighborhoods. So without excessive volume, and speeding was also provided on your map at an earlier meeting, it looks like the speeds, while yes, of concern to residents, again, don't exceed for the most part 30 miles per hour, except on Gulf Terrace. That entrance island mentality that you identified as the benefit of those center islands, how far or long do you anticipate that benefit lasting when the street containing the island is only a block long?
And you're correct. It probably will not have as much of an impact as, say, 70th and Cornelia or some of the other locations, 66th Street and Cornelia as well. Because of the shorter distance here and then the dedicated, I guess, intersection up here that would facilitate a turn, have a much lesser impact at this location then.
And I understand that there's a greater cost for the construction of this island than there simply would be for the repaving in place?
There is some upcharge, so to speak, for that improvement because of the landscape material that's in there, those type of things. There is some cost associated with these that would be both borne by the city and by the residents and through the assessment.
What about the long-term costs of repair and replacement? I would anticipate that the replacement of this might not occur on the same schedule as street or road reconstruction.
It's quite possible that the vegetation may be on a different timeline than the pavement rehabilitation. It may or may not be required out there as far as knockdowns, things like that you may see from errant vehicles. You were corrected probably on a different timeline, a shorter timeline than the pavement rehabilitation.
And finally, the question about pavement width. What is the current width? I understand the streets are not exactly the same width. Wind Road to the south actually appears quite a bit narrower than the roadway to the north. What are the current widths and what are the proposed widths as shown?
Just for Wind Road or for all the streets?
For those two streets.
Oh, sure. Wind Road is about 27, 28 feet wide. It's a rural section right now. There's no curb and gutter on it, and we would be looking to put that back in a very similar width through the easterly half of it. The westerly half would widen out to accommodate that entrance island that is shown here. It would widen out to 36 feet from about the 28 feet up to 36, so you'd be gaining additional 8 feet or so. And then up at Lakeview Drive extended here, just the opposite actually. The width at the west end is about 34 feet, 33 feet. We'd be widening it out to 36, so I guess a couple of feet widening. But as we work our way to the east, we're actually removing large sections of pavement. You can see this is that pavement that Member Swenson was talking about that would be removed, as well as some pavement in this location that would be removed and tightened up.
And could the tightening of that intersection and the narrowing of the width of the roadway be accomplished without the construction of landscape islands, without the addition of those islands?
Yes, it could. We could certainly make the improvements to the neighborhood without the landscape islands.
And understanding that there's a reduction of pavement, particularly at the intersection on the roadway to the north, whereas there's an expansion at the Wilson Road end of Wind Road to the south, how does this fit within the formulations that staff has done leading to the recommended narrowing of Lakeview Drive? How does that change in pavement width get reflected in the computations for lake quality?
If I understand your question correctly, the initial 0.04 acres of total pavement reduction in the neighborhood was accounted for in the January 18th plan, and these entrance islands were part of that. So there was some offset of the widening versus some of the narrowing. An additional 0.2 of an acre or thereabouts would be seen by reducing Lakeview Drive from 26 feet down to 18 feet. So in total, we have about 1/4 of an acre, 0.24 acres of total reduction if we did both improvements.
And then last, in the form also of a comment, so I'll bookend my stuff, is that Sunnyside, and that was a very helpful comparison. That's a roadway that I walk on quite frequently. It's flanked by 2 sidewalks to the north and the south, and that makes it feel much safer for pedestrians who are sharing the road with vehicles and bicycles. Thank you.
Member Sprague.
Back to street narrowing on Lakeview. I know this wasn't presented, but is there yet another option to, without the filtration swales, just narrow the street? Reduce pervious pavement, bulkhead, curb and gutter, and just reduce the width of the street?
Yes, we could do that. We could do that on any of the street within the neighborhood, but if there was a street that would probably has the least amount of traffic volumes, homes only on one side, and maybe get a little additional buffer there between the lake, that would be the street.
Member Swenson?
Discussion is winding down because I have a proposal. Okay.
Let's discuss it a little bit before
Okay.
we have a motion.
That's fine.
No, go ahead.
I don't have any more to discuss. I have a motion, but I have a statement before the motion in addition, so.
All right. Why don't-
You-
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I look at it this way. We only do this kind of planning and have a chance for changes like this once every 40 years. So it's important that we do this and that we put it off, as Mary said, and looked a little bit further. So I think since the frontage road has a sidewalk, and this really is a walking shed to 2 elementary schools, a junior high, and where we play football most Friday nights in the fall, I really consider this area kind of a safe routes to school. So if those dividers at the entrance and the sidewalk pieces that get us to the fact that you can now cross and get over to that sidewalk on the frontage road, even though it's tar and kind of ugly, but I still use it. I think that's good. I support the swales and an 18-foot wide road because I think that's a good compromise for this lake. I support the barrier or bulkhead style curbs because I think it's important to protect the edges of this lake. The water erodes very quickly as it comes down. You can see it in 3 or 4 places where it moves down hills from other streets and is kind of eaten away. Plus, I think if we're going to put in these swales, which aren't inexpensive to do, they need to be protected too. So I would support this March 15th design. And I guess the only addition I would add is that I would probably add no parking on Lakeview. But I can save that for an amendment if I can get a second for this motion.
That's in the form of a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a second for discussion purposes? I'll second it. All right. Everybody understand Member Swenson's proposal? All right. I would comment that I do not favor the no-build scenario. When I think about the reduced width of the roadway, it seems consistent with that neighborhood to reduce the width of the roadway. I like the notion of adding those filtration swales. The landscape island for me at Lakeview and Gulf Terrace is important. Less important to me is the landscape island on Wind. That's the only thing I'm having trouble with right now. I do favor the bulkhead style curb and gutter as well. I don't think the surmountable, even though that's favored by the neighborhood, really accomplishes the environmental goals that we want to accomplish. And I would give a slight nod to the barrier bulkhead style for that purpose, which is the reason we postponed this in the first place. So those would be my comments in seconding your motion. Other comments?
I Ken, I am grateful for the process and for all of the work that staff did on this. I am grateful that it coincided with our NEMO workshop, non-point education for elected officials and others on what can be done by a community to help water quality. And I think that that was helpful to several of us here. I would at this point support curb and gutter. I do understand the concern of the residents, but I think it's the best solution. So I can support the bulkhead curb and gutter. I think the project has to be done. I'm not a fan of a no build. However, there are principles, there's a lot of, I'm going to make a distinction. Balance has been a big word tonight. And there are areas of concern in which residents have had a lot of opportunity to comment, and whether or not ultimately their desires are met, they've had a lot of participation. And I think the water quality issue is particularly in that regard. We've heard from a lot of people. There's also a lot of traffic calming proposed, as Mr. Sullivan identified. The narrowing of Lakeview Drive is in that category. And when we talk about eliminating parking, even though I know that there are homes that also have access to another street, I can think of circumstances, including holidays and just a major party.
I pulled that out of the motion.
Where someone, so what I feel with that street narrowing is it's in a different category from the other items about which residents have had adequate notice. They've had the chance to comment. We know what those comments are. We know what their what the measurement of support is. We don't know what the measurement of support is for the islands. We don't know what the measurement of support is for the narrowing of the street. We have a predicted diversion of about half the traffic to the roadway that happens to have the highest volume in the neighborhood. And I know we hear about volume. Some of the tightening of the intersections, I think, will accomplish what's being sought without that potential diversion, but I see both the landscape islands and the narrowing of Lakeview Drive as having significant potential of diversion to traffic, to streets where residents are not aware that these proposals will have that effect. There is no data to support them, and that's, again, referring to the concerns, not minimizing concerns about volume and speed, but we don't have the data that supports these kind of measures that makes them cost effective. We don't have a widespread of agreement on what a problem is. In fact, reviewing the comments last night in preparation for this meeting, the answers to the questionnaires, the only request I found in the record for landscape islands was from a resident who lives at the southern end of Sherwood and Southview Lane. So we're putting something where it wasn't requested by the neighborhood. It wasn't part of the original plan. People didn't have the ability to comment. We also don't have that measurement of shared perception of the problem. Where is it that the problem occurs? And therefore, we don't have a widespread agreement that the proposed solution is going to address that. Plus, we have the potential fallout of diverted traffic. So that's where I really have a problem. I support the project. I support the curb and gutter.
Where are you on the swales? Because the 18-foot street allows the swales if you want swales. So you have to be prepared if you don't have an 18-foot wide street to have no swales.
What I hear Mr. Sullivan saying, and I heard at the NEMO workshop and I see on the map, is that the most significant difference to the quality of this lake in terms of human effort is going to come, I think, from the homeowners' own efforts. It's going to come from creating those buffers between the yards and the water.
They own two-thirds of the shoreline almost.
Well, yes. and viewing what, again, looking at the traffic volume, looking at a lot of it consisting of people, drivers from the neighborhood, lawn chemicals from the neighborhood,
lack of buffer from the neighborhood. So swales are no swales. So you're no swales if you're not 18 feet.
I don't see the cost benefit of swales, particularly when it results in a reduced roadway width that is thoughtfully proposed, but is at the end of a process. And we don't know what the impact of that is going to be, but I can tell you that Sunnyside Road with sidewalks on both sides feels safe to walk because it has sidewalks on both sides.
Member Sprague.
Member
Just
Bennett.
a comment quick before you comment. I thought the landscape islands were in there in the January 18 plan. So you said that they weren't in there.
No, they weren't in the design when residents had they weren't questioned in the questionnaire, the sidewalks were, and curb and gutter, or what elements were in that original questionnaire. But there was no measurement. Were they there at the December open house?
Yeah. Well,
They were added as a result. They were added in the January plan that came in front of us. And yes, I understand that we haven't had letters and calls opposing them, but I think with what we know and don't know, we can anticipate that there will be diversion of traffic. We can anticipate that there will be some impact on school buses, emergency response vehicles trying to navigate a tighter turn. And the benefit that's being described is that entrance island mentality, which is going to apply for a block. So again, looking at a cost-benefit analysis, I don't, as well as the principles of do we have data that supports this measure, I don't think we have the data. I don't think we have the neighborhood agreement on the problem. I don't think that this solution is going to address it. And I think the cost-benefit analysis doesn't work out.
I also recall that the resident at 4818 Lakeview ardently supported the traffic island. It was right there.
She wanted sidewalks.
She wanted sidewalks too.
Yeah.
And
she wants sidewalks throughout the neighborhood.
Yeah, which was a great request in my opinion. But anyway, Member Sprague.
I concur with Member Bennett. The other thing that concerns me about the narrowing of the lane without much input is we're really turning this street into kind of a private lane. Why not for the other side of the lake or some other area within the neighborhood? It seems like it's inequitable to choose this street without greater benefit. The traffic islands to me are not solving the real problem, which is mid-block speeds that Mr. Sullivan discussed. And to me, it seems more of like it's an aesthetic issue for the neighborhood, and I don't know that, my charge is to seek cost-effective, efficient, and long-lasting public infrastructure, not to make the neighborhood the most aesthetically pleasing that it can be. And on that principle, I also don't support the traffic island element. I'm a little bit disappointed. I felt like the January 18th option with the stormwater treatment options in place, which we know now are not feasible, kind of met this cost-benefit balance. It would be something with curb and gutter that would be a long-lasting improvement and would have some impact on the lake, keeping in mind that the greatest impact is not on the public right-of-way to begin with. So I'm left in this kind of halfway place. I feel like this solution is not the most cost-effective infrastructure improvement that we can do, and it makes me think that we're better off going back to the basics.
I would just comment on I mentioned I didn't favor the Wind Road one. I was having difficulty with that one. The other one, I've driven that route enough to know that people just kind of sling through that intersection. It reminds me of some of the intersections up in Country Club that were corrected. And I think even with teeing them off, the one landscape island I think will have a significant effect to remind people that they are entering a neighborhood that will not serve only the purpose of aesthetics, will be the one on Lakeview Drive. I understand the concerns on the narrowing of the roadway on Lakeview on the north side, but I think the purpose of postponing this matter from January until mid-March was to look at all the environmental issues that people in the neighborhoods had such a great concern over, and now we have a solution that seems to be appropriate, that doesn't enhance the cost, narrows the roadway, but and increases the ability to filter some of the material. And but nonetheless, I see the balance in all this, and I think that's one reason staff has kind of posed two different solutions to us, favoring probably the one that's more practical. Anyway, that's...
I'm from the Cornelia neighborhood, and I've been on the streets of the traffic islands, and I see no impact on speeding, on traffic speeds in the neighborhood. Once you get past the turn, it has no impact. What I do see is when the road was changed on Cornelia Drive and they did the bump out, that had a huge impact on speeding throughout the neighborhood. So my point is, if we go back to cost-effective, basic infrastructure plans. We could do, like Member Bennett referenced, we could do street narrowing at the entrance, not a traffic island, and still maintain as well some pedestrian throughfare. The other thing about the traffic island at Lakeview is that the Bike Edina Task Force was talking about safety for bikers and crossing that intersection, and we're creating another hazard. And I just don't see the benefit offsetting the costs. And I think we should go back to the basics. Maybe there's a way to have I know this isn't the motion on the table, but maybe there's a way to have a redacted plan that involves some pavement narrowing and other things, as I was discussing with Mr. Sullivan, that will reduce pervious pavement, be cost effective, and also traffic calm at the turning entrances.
Member Brindle, is all this helpful or confusing?
Thank you. That roadway narrowing, I think, is, Mr. Sullivan told us it's possible to narrow that northern roadway, and if that northern roadway were also narrowed and the intersection tightened up, I think without the hazard created and the additional expense created by a center island, the same impact of slowing could be obtained.
Sure. I've got two things. If, in fact, we don't put the landscape islands in, can we still have the sidewalk?
Yes, staff would still recommend installing sidewalk from the frontage road to the intersection, the stop sign at the northerly entrance, and then down at Wind Road, I would recommend that sidewalk, well, that has a little bit more of a gray area. We were going to extend it just past the island. We can continue to do that as well and stop at mid-block, or we could push it all the way to the intersection with Sherwood.
Push it all the way in.
I guess I would do them both the same way and push them all the way to the intersection of the street and keep the kids off the street or the pedestrians off the street, at least in that entry to the neighborhood. Once they're through, they're through. But in that area, they're in between two tight turns that are quite close to one another. So it may be best to go all the way with that. I want to talk about the curb or no curb around Lake Harvey. And I've been thinking, well, if curb or no curb, and what we're really talking about is 13% of the drainage, we could just leave it the way it is. But it's the filtration swales that make me think that maybe curb is the way to get the best performance out of the filtration swales. Would you explain how curbs and the filtration swales work together, and whether without a curb a filtration swale would work at all?
Council members, yes. The curb and gutter would be utilized to direct that overland flow, to capture it, contain it, and direct it to the appropriate inlets at the filtration swale. We'd probably have 2 or 3, maybe even 4 inlets where we'd rip-wrap down in there and make that a nice transitional area for that water to get into that filtration swale before it makes its way to the lake. If you were not to install curb and gutter, you would have a rural section or earth edge along there. There'd be grass like it is today. And what ends up happening over time is the water doesn't sheet drain, so to speak, in nice, wide, slow meandering over that bank. What it ends up doing is it ends up making a little rivulet, a little river type area, and then concentrating its flow at 1 or 2 locations. That concentrated flow causes the erosion, causes those type of things that we're trying to avoid with this project. So the curb and gutter allows us to capture that and put it to where we need to and dissipate the water appropriately.
So they really work together. Okay, thanks.
Mayor, I want to go back to this issue of equity again, because it's another thing that concerns me. You know, the next neighborhood comes along, they've got, everyone's got mid-block speeding, and then they're going to want these traffic islands as well, because what's to differentiate them from this neighborhood? And then the next 10 could ask for them as well. Is this the next, mechanism we're going to use to calm in every neighborhood? My sense is that it's not an effective calming mechanism for intra-neighborhood traffic.
I may have misunderstood this, but I thought the speed here was an entry speed problem, not a mid-block speed problem. That's the reason they were suggesting the pinch down and the traffic islands at Lakeview and Gulf Terrace.
The speed issue out here, as discussed at the January 18th meeting, has somewhat more to do with perception than probably the reality. A lot of these speeds throughout the neighborhood are relative to residential streets. The entrance islands were that mental cue that was suggested as you're entering a neighborhood. Please drive more respectful, responsible for pedestrians, bicyclists, and the traveling public. That was kind of the rationale for the installation at the time.
If you found in your neighborhood, for example, that the pinch down works more effectively than the traffic island, that's something worth talking about, I think.
Yeah, and the pinch down, I mean, would it's not so much the visual signal, it's what affects the driver's ability to maneuver that turn. So if you're narrowing it, you are affecting his or her ability to make that turn. That engineering solution to me is more effective than a visual cue per se. And then also allows for the safe passage of bicycles. You know, I'm concerned about that Bike Edina Task Force comment that really hasn't been discussed or resolved with the bike traffic going over that bridge.
I like the potential for using narrower road width throughout the block long rather than just at the entrance, reducing pavement overall and then providing room for a sidewalk. Because that connects pedestrians from inside the neighborhood with the walkway along Wilson Road.
Mayor, as long as you are my second, could I request that we withdraw the motion that I made and you seconded and that I propose a different one?
I will withdraw my second.
Okay.
Before you do that, can I just ask one question of staff? I think this might be important information for
That's fine.
Okay, just for your own benefit.
It's not for yours.
For our benefit. What would be your recommendation for narrowing the lane? What's a significant enough amount in Lakeview to have some impact on the water quality, but not go from 27 feet to 18, you know, really change the whole character of the street and parking and diverting traffic anywhere else? I mean, I know this is a little bit on the fly, but, you know, is it 3 feet, is it 5 feet?
I can probably take a crack, maybe Jack can add to that too, Councilmember Sprague and council members. From our perspective, if you're narrowing it down, from a public safety perspective, they like 26 feet as a minimum, but 28 feet really seems to be the number that we like to stick with, because 28 feet is back to back a curb, so the actual face of curb to face of curb is only 27 feet. You now knock off 3 feet of the gutter pan, so now you're down to about 24 feet. Put a center line stripe on that one to keep people on their either side of the roadway. You don't have much room for a vehicle and a bike. If you're concerned about the cyclists that we're being on the street, because now your pedestrians are on the sidewalk. Because that was a concern that you had with the landscape islands, or the Bike Edina folks had with the landscape islands, is how do you fit a bicycle in those lanes with a vehicle? And basically what happens in those is that the bicycle takes over that lane of traffic through that area.
But you could do, I mean, I see the distinction between Lakeview and the traffic island to be a little different, because they're crossing over to get to the bridge. On the street, this street is 27 feet now, correct, curb to curb, Lakeview?
It's Lakeview is 29 feet, I think, is what our technician measured.
So, I mean, there could be a share of the road scenario with, I mean, what's 66th Street? What's the width of that? It's right, you know, it's a heavier volume road. My point is, you can have a share of the road scenario with slightly less pervious surface. Maybe it's, you know, 3 feet, and still make that incremental change to helping water quality, keeping in mind again that the most impact we can have is by facilitating the applications to the watershed for these cost-sharing grants along the shore.
Okay, let me try another one. It may not fly, but let's give it another shot. So the March 13th plan, but with no entrance islands, but with pinch down at Wind and the northern Lakeview route. Sidewalk stubs that go 1 block long into the neighborhood. Streets as designed otherwise with bulkhead curbs. And I'm still with the swales and the 18-inch wide road, but with no parking.
We've got really narrowed the road now.
18-foot wide road, but with no parking.
I think Member Brindle favors the 28 or 26-foot road width and surmountable curbs.
Surmountable curb around Lake Harvey.
Oh, and bulkhead on the
And bulkhead on the
side.
rest of it.
For what's,
There is bulkhead on almost everything. Lake Harvey's the
Right.
only thing that doesn't have curb.
but surmountable won't affect the volume of discharge into the lake. It'll be, it's neutral, and that curbs are neutral in that regard. They're not creating more discharge into the lake. So whether it's bulkhead or the surmountable, it's not going to change the impact on the lake because it's neutral both ways.
I know, but I'm looking at the aesthetics of having the curb not be a border, a physical vertical border, but more of a gradual.
Wider.
I know.
It looks wider.
I
It's
totally
bigger.
know, but it
Surmountable.
is the compromise that the neighborhood is at least entertaining, and so that's where I am with it.
Okay, so I think we've got 4 council members that clearly favor the bulkhead on both sides, so I think that's a done deal.
The only reason why is because it has no impact to change curbs other than the aesthetic. And the offset to that is you have, as Mr. Sullivan referenced, you have future maintenance issues. I want the most long-lasting street that can be built. We're trying to do roads that last 60 years now, not 35. So why create on one block for, and then you get into the equity thing again for the next neighborhood. Well, we don't like the look of it either, so we should get surmountable because they got surmountable. There's no reason to differentiate. Well, they were on the lake. Well, we're near the creek. We're going to get into those arguments, and I just can't see the rationale making a distinction.
I'd like to note for the record, because the curb and gutter discussion has been, I think, a full one. A resident gave us some material from the state of Rhode Island, and interestingly enough, it talked about the road, at the edge of the road issue, and it said that, you can compensate for not having curb and gutter by doing this special surface at the edge of the roadway, and almost kind of a pervious paver edge to the roadway. And so obviously it's something that other communities are wrestling with as well, but this is a fair, I think, way for a community to approach it, and we have had instance in the last year where someone with surmountable curb came back and wanted changed back.
My understanding too was that with or without the filtration swale, from an environmental standpoint, you still favor the bulkhead as opposed to the surmountable, isn't that right? So there is a distinction between the two in that fashion as well. All right, so now I think we've probably eliminated the landscape islands. We got bulkhead. We've got sidewalks. We need to discuss road width, and we need to discuss the which will inherently have in that discussion the filtration swale issue.
Well, it's just road width on that one piece, and it's only road width as far as I heard everyone was talking pieces on that one piece by the water on Lakeview.
Oh, correct.
I don't want to redesign this project. I really don't. I mean,
To get out to bid.
yes, exactly. Right.
This isn't fair
I
to the
think
rest of this neighborhood to the
I think a
south.
compromise of narrowing Lakeview, which would allow for the buffer garden, which would allow for the other things that they want to do, and then if in fact it's bulkhead, then it's bulkhead. But if that increases the efficiency of the filtration swale, then I think it's worth it.
So you a second to my motion?
Is that what your motion was? Okay, then I'll second it.
All right, now, more discussion.
We can have more discussion. I
Member
just need
Sprague.
a second for discussion.
It's a reasonable compromise. I guess I would like to have one more option for narrowing on that road, but I might not get it in time. Anything we can do to enhance, the water quality benefits on that strip, even though it's not the most impactful part of the project, maybe that will be the catalyst for the neighbors to get together and do it. I'm hopeful for that, and to me, that alone could push me over the edge slightly.
Well, and I think it's important that we try something new that has been found to be supported by the watershed district, and I really commend the engineering department to bring something new back. I know it's not easy when we send you back to the drawing board, but I'd like to at least give this. Should I try? Sorry.
There is a tree on the map that shows that it needs to be removed to create the swales. What is the condition, size and condition of that tree? Yes.
That tree is I believe is an ash tree that's located on the north side. I think the diameter is about 4 to 6 inch diameter. Staff would look to remove that tree and would work with our forestry department to install additional trees consistent with their planning process and locations around the lake and offset that tree removal.
Mayor, I just want to make one more comment.
Yes.
If this motion does pass, I think it is an opportunity for a community event, neighborhood event, whatever, to have this. I know it's on private property, but they could make it into a community event to have this shoreland stabilization program, to see it in action. And, I would be willing to go out for that event.
I believe the watershed educators travel, so it may be possible to have some kind of on-site talk or conference with the neighborhood.
And then also in Bloomington, they have a pamphlet that showcases some of the experiments they're doing, kind of the innovative techniques they're using for water management, and perhaps this could be a case study that could go in that book as well for us, for Edina.
All right, you want to walk back through your motion one more time with all the elements of it, please?
We'll pick the March 15th map as the one that we're using, but we're taking out the entrance islands at Wind Road and the west part of Lakeview, but creating some sort of pinch down to slow turning in. We are maintaining the sidewalk stubs. The full one along Lakeview West and the one on Wind Road will go all the way into
Sherwood, is that what it is?
Sherwood.
Yep.
The streets will be then as designed otherwise, and there will be bulkhead curbs, and we are supporting the swales and the 18-foot wide road on Lakeview with no parking on Lakeview.
I have a question. And that is, we had talked about the existing width of Lakeview Drive being wider than the existing width of Wind Road. So does your motion encompass not only a narrowing at the entrance, but also a narrowing of that pavement altogether?
That's what it shows already on the map that I think that Mr. Sullivan showed us.
Yeah, staff would certainly recommend keeping the pavement width no wider, if not narrowing it to date. There again, to minimize our impervious surface.
As long as we have enough room for share the road bike paths on either side, because I think that was especially the Lakeview West area. Okay.
All right, I've got a motion, we've got a second. Further discussion? Do we need a roll call on this? I think we do.
Member Sprague.
Aye.
Member Swenson.
Aye.
Member Bennett.
Aye.
Member Brindle.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. Nice work. Interesting work. And thank you to staff again for working so hard on this over the past few months and engaging the neighborhood as well. All right, we've got, I don't see Kirk Johnson here, but we have, the next matter on the agenda is proposal to consider the expansion of a Nice Ride Minnesota into Edina per the Edina Bike Task Force request, which is attached to the back of the resolution or the recommendation. Manager Neal, do you want to take this in the absence of Kirk Johnson, or has it been fairly well?
I think Mr. Hool has got this
Mr. Hool?
one for tonight.
Our resident bicyclist, in-house bicyclist, is taking this matter.
Mayor and Council, on this Nice Ride Minnesota, actually what they're looking for is basically a consideration of support for supporting the Nice Ride units to be put in at 44th and France and at 50th and France. Just basically supporting this type of a system, and I guess what we could probably do is come back at a later time and describe the system in more detail. But what it essentially is it provides bicycles for use by subscribers, and a subscriber would be anybody that would ride a bike. Basically, what they would do is utilize some type of a credit card to check out a bike from a bike rack system, and then they could return that bike to any other place within the Nice Ride system. And throughout the Minneapolis area, they do have Nice Ride type racking systems or systems that are in place. So that's what it would do, is really expand the system out of the Minneapolis area into the suburbs, and there's a number of suburbs that they're looking at expanding into, first-rank suburbs, obviously.
Questions for Director Hool?
No, I've seen this in action, and I think we should consider it.
Remember, Brindle, you were at the meeting that we...
Yes.
Well, I was there as well, but...
Yes, and I have...
They made a presentation.
I have actually, I haven't checked out one of these bikes, but I've watched people use them, and they are used at downtown Minneapolis. I think they had 100,000 rides, 100,000 customers.
I don't recall that.
There was some enormous number, and it was 100,000. So I'll have to clarify exactly what it was. Nonetheless, at our last meeting, one of the things we talked about is the parking problem at 50th and France. So this could be a measure to help that out, if we had a couple Nice Ride stations that got people close to other parking areas too.
Okay. Well, I can just comment too from discussions I've had with Mayor Ryback that they think it's been an enormous success in Minneapolis. And I think it was probably 9 months ago now that he approached me about the 44th in France and 50th in France areas, that it would be good to add those locations into the overall system. And so, you know, he said we should carefully consider it and encouraged us to participate. So I think we should, if they can otherwise make arrangements with businesses at 50th and France and 44th in France to find locations for the bicycles, we should support it. I think so.
Can I make one comment
Sure.
too on Member Brindle talked about 100,000 rides. The other thing that I read was that they only had, I think, 2 bikes lost or stolen. I mean, that's to me is an important statistic that shows this program is really effective in meeting its goals. So,
thank you. We got a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next is the Decision Resources proposal about a community-wide survey, and Manager Neal has this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an item that I have previously briefed the council on. We have been working with a local Twin Cities polling company called Decision Resources. They do a lot of this work in the Twin Cities and statewide with cities, counties, and school districts primarily. They do also have clients that are like Edina in many respects, demographically and in other ways, that would allow us some good comparability to look at their results compared to our results in this survey. What we're proposing here is kind of a standard quality of life survey that would serve as a baseline of public opinion of how we're performing right now, not only how we're performing, but also the different physical attributes of the city. I've received some feedback from, I think, 4 of you we will have another meeting with Decision Resources staff to see how we can incorporate that feedback into the survey instrument itself. But what I'm looking here for tonight is for your support in giving them a signal that we'd like to hire them to do this and to set a not to exceed number for their contract.
Do you have a recommendation for that number?
Yeah, I do. Right now we are probably right about the $20,000 range. I would suggest that, and that $20,000 range is about 125 questions. And I think that's about where we ought to be. When you start getting into the 140, 150 question range, you're getting into a telephone survey that could take 25 to 30 minutes. Their research will tell you that most people will stay on the phone that long to do a survey for their community, but we can do this in the $20,000 range, so that would be my suggestion.
Is that your top number?
No, my top number would be $24,000, which is right about the 150 question range.
So moved. 24,000.
We would propose that this $24,000 come from the fund balance of the communications fund, so it would not be a general fund item.
Got a motion? We have a second?
Don't have a second. We have a motion. I have a second. Okay.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor Hovland, just one point. So in terms of you know, are there other vendors that you've looked at? You know, how did we get down to Decision Resources?
There are not other vendors that I have looked at for this particular project. I believe if comparability, and this is a question I think for the council to consider, if comparability in terms of wanting to look at our results compared to peer city results in the Twin Cities metro area, if that's important to you, Decision Resources is the vendor you should choose. If that's not important to you, then we could look nationwide for other vendors. But I think that comparability for our peer cities would be important, and that's why I recommend them. And they did 1999, I think, was the last quality of life survey.
Yep.
And if we do go with them, I know we've all given our feedback individually. How much of the survey would be impacted by the suggested changes? I mean, my concern is reading the survey. It's a little soft, you know, in terms of probing and getting to some real issues that could help us improve. I mean, it's great for us to be cheerleaders for our city. I think everyone will say it's a great city, but I want to know what we can do to improve. And I think the tone of it needs to tack that direction. So that's my concern.
And I think that's some of the feedback that I've received from council members. What I would tell you is that one of the things I think you're going to find really interesting about this data once you get it back is you're going to find it's interesting to get the responses back to the questions, but what's really interesting is when you get down into the cross-tabulation of the data, where you're looking at the responses to question number 4 and you're cross-tabbing that statistically with the answers to question number 50, because you want to see if there's some kind of relationship there between how much contact residents have with city staff and whether they have a positive view of city government. And there's thousands, literally thousands of different cross-tabulations you can do with this data, and that's really where you're going to find some of the best information about what we can do differently. And so when you're looking at some of these questions on their face, and they do have an appearance of softness, or you're not sure what the purpose of that question is, the purpose of some of these questions might be a crosstab against some other piece of data in the survey.
And how will so we can see where it started and where it finishes after our comments, how will that be tracked? Will there be a red line document? Will there be any way to measure how the input impacted the document? We have highlighted in yellow changes on some of our minutes. I mean, will there be any way for us to measure, getting back to my concern about the tone and the overall effectiveness of the document?
That's probably a question best answered by a conversation with Decision Resources.
Okay.
They're the owners of the instrument. I'm guessing they can do that. I'm looking at Jennifer. I'm not capable of doing that as I've.
Well, here's
But
what I
think
think
they
we should
could.
keep in mind. And I was just fresh to the council in '99 when that other survey was done. And they really know what they're doing, and they have there's a methodology that they employ. There's a reason they ask the questions the way they do. And what we found out in 1999, when it all shook out, as I recall, just some of the elements, the things that people were least satisfied with was water quality. We found out that our city staff, in terms of its rating by the residents, was the highest of any town that they measure. And since '99, we've seen Decision Resources do their work not only for the school district, but also in all the MLC cities. And they also work for the MLC, all the organization we belong to take a broader survey of the region. And their work is outstanding. The work that Bill does in particular is, it will be money well spent, and we will get worthwhile information out of it that we can use to help improve the quality of service delivery to our citizens and find out what they really care about. Member Bennett.
Hearing the comment and the support and the recommendations and knowing some of what they have done in the past, I do share Member Sprague's concern as well that it would be good to know how the suggestions have been are represented in the final set of questions.
And I understand, we don't want to materially change the entire document, but I think some tweaks, given that it's been since 1999, I think we do need to probe a little deeper in certain areas. Maybe it's just one question here, one question there, but it'd be nice to see how he has customized it slightly to reflect the views that have been submitted.
What I would say to you is that in some ways it's better if we give them some indications of questions, maybe topical questions that we're interested in, and get them to write that question for us, because as the mayor was referencing, they do all of this work with their own call center in St. Paul. And so they not only do they have experience writing these questions, but they have experience testing the validity of the questions so that they have a chance to know whether or not that question elicits the kind of response that we're wanting to know.
That's what I hear you suggesting, is that here's what we want to know more about. You ask the question any way you want.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm also looking for a document that will reflect the changes, basically, that they make.
I'm sure they can do that.
They can do that. I think that was asked of them in '99 as well. There were areas of inquiry that people wanted to make, and just get left it to them to figure out how to ask the question and elicit the kind of information that we wanted to get. So, okay, good. Did we vote on this? Okay. We have a motion and a second and discussion. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Resolution accepting donations. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second that we adopt Resolution 2011-38, accepting donations to the city. Further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. One notation here. We always post the names of the donors up, but this warrants some recognition at the council level, I think, and that for the Edina Park Department, through the Edina Community Foundation, for the 4th of July upcoming this year in 2011, the Fairview Southdale Hospital Association has donated $16,000 through the Edina Community Foundation to the Park Department to help with the 4th of July fireworks. So very commendable on their part. All right, we pulled next the Traffic Safety Committee report. Member Bennett, I think, pulled that matter, asked it be pulled.
Thank you. My concern is not with what's in this document this week. My concern is that in the past we have seen, I think it's sometimes Section C, sometimes it's Section D. I understand Section A is the requests on which staff is recommending approval. Section B is consistently the requests on which staff is recommending denial of a request. and Section C is those deferred. So I think it's Section D that in the past has capsulized for us where reports are coming from elsewhere in the city, and I think it's very helpful for us as a body and for anybody who accesses the council agenda online to have an understanding of what people are experiencing in the city and what it is that they are reporting. So I would like to ask, I am asking that Section D be restored to the traffic safety report going forward.
Can I comment on that? Councilmember Bennett, we did have that in there about twice. Boyd Tate, our traffic safety coordinator, used to do that at the end of the year, give you a summary of the reports. I had him put it in there a couple times, and what happened was it got pulled at the Transportation Commission, and the commission was asking for specific reports of his calls that he had. And that wasn't the intent of that, was really just to show how much volume that Boyd handles in the city, that really he explains typically a situation or what the warrants are and on a certain intersection. And usually the applicant will think about it and then either call him back and want to pursue something or else go away. We can put it back in, we'll put it back in, but the intent of that is not to submit all the reports or the phone call memos that Boyd takes with those. And if you support us on that, I would say, yeah, that's a good thing to put it in there to show people that, yeah, we do handle a huge volume of calls regarding traffic safety.
And I think just as it's important for the council to understand where public safety concerns are arising in the city, it's really important for us to understand. I recall one of the questions in '99, or I didn't recall water quality being the greatest area of concern. I recalled it being traffic, and had noted some reference to that. So in any event, that's where my concern is coming from, that it enables us to stay informed.
Sure. In relation to that too, Member Bennett, we talked somewhere, I don't know if it was at the work session with the ETC or somewhere else, about having a system to track these calls so we can identify patterns of perception of issues. Is there any plan for that in the future to somehow, track where these calls are coming from?
We do track these calls, and we can probably have our JS personnel see if she can't pull together some type of a mapping system to kind of show where the calls are and perceptions are. We'll see if we can do that. So.
Thank you very much. That'd be great.
Okay, good. You want to move this matter, Member Bennett?
I would move the approval then of the traffic safety report.
Second. All right. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next matter was 4F. We pulled off the consent agenda, and that dealt with the proposed approval of the contract for 2010 through 2012 with our firefighter bargaining unit. And Member Sprague, you asked that be pulled.
Yes, I wanted to present to the public a few pieces of information I think are important. One is, and I asked Manager Neal to pull some data on our staff per calls ratio for the fire department.
Share it now.
Yes.
I pulled together some information from Chief Scheer that we had shared with Councilmember Sprague. 31 full-time firefighters. It's the 5th busiest fire department in the state. It has the highest number of calls per firefighter of any department in the state. We responded to 4,509 calls for service in 2010. 80% of those calls are EMS calls. Ambulance revenue in 2010 is an important component in our budget, was $1.6 million. It's the highest it's ever been. Calls for service increased 4.5%, have been increasing at a rate of 4.5% over the last 5 years. Budget has increased 2% per year over that last 5 years. And the summary of their contract proposal was a 2% settlement in 2010, 2% in 2011, and 1.5% in 2012, a 3-year contract. That is between our dispatch and animal control contracts and the police contracts. Firefighters are essential employees eligible for arbitration in the state of Minnesota, and non-union and Local 49 employees received 0.5% in 2010 and 1% in 2011. So when you look at this data, it's really salary settlements this year all over the board, very different than what Edina has had in the past. It wasn't my goal to go that direction, but that's the way that it ended up this year. We do have 3 contracts, if this is approved by the council tonight, that are settled to 2012. And there are 2 contracts that are not settled for 2012. And we would start working on those contracts later this year, hopefully wrap them up this year too.
Thank you. So with that being said, I'd like to.
All right. Is there a second? Moved and second that we approve the contracts for 2010, or the contract for 2010 through 12 with the IAFF number 1275 bargaining unit, which is the firefighters. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And we have an appointment to the Edina Transportation Commission to take care of. Per the work done by the council, we had a person that we had picked on a contingent basis. One contingency didn't arise, but another one did with a resignation of one of our longtime members, and Jean White, who's done a great job for our community during her time on the Edina Transportation Commission. And so I would move the appointment of Robert McElveen to fill the vacancy created by Jean White's resignation. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Discussion? All those in comment? Discussion?
I would like to say that I started serving with Jean in January 2004, and I wish her the best.
Thank you.
She served very well, and she was a voice for transit users in the community and for people who moved around on foot and on bicycle, and I think that her successor has that interest and use as well, and so he's a good successor to her, but we will miss her and are grateful for her.
There were, I think, at least 2 summers where I saw her at Braemar on the weekends when I was out there, and just attacking buckthorn, wading into the deep woods with her buckthorn tools and doing one heck of a job. So she's going to be missed. She's done a lot for our town. So with respect to Robert McElveen, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Now we have a little bit of a discussion on the Arts Center Board and Heritage Preservation Board vacancies, and I think we had some opinions coming into Deb from different council members that were varied, and so we thought it just best set this for a council discussion and figure out how we should deal with this. And anyone want to lead off that discussion?
Well, I'm kind of thinking that what I'd like to see us do.
We can talk about processes or people in the
Yeah,
abstract.
it's the process that I'd like to talk
prospective
about.
employees in the abstract, or
And
appointees in the abstract.
what I'd like to do is make these appointments at our next meeting and review the applications that we have and make our selections, because I'm not sure we've come to consensus yet on this.
The one thing we might have consensus on is that we do not have to go back into an interview process.
That's right.
Is that,
We
does someone
have
feel
candidates.
differently about that?
What I noted in looking back at the rosters and the interview schedules is that both of these are bodies that did not have a lot of applicants in comparison with some of the other board and commissions. And so what it appears to me is that we have one applicant left who applied for the Art Center Board, but stated that she really preferred the other board to which she applied, for which she applied. And then with respect to the HPB, I believe we have one candidate we interviewed and one candidate who withdrew from the process before being interviewed. So
Actually, she did not withdraw. She didn't interview. She did not withdraw. because we clarified that she was still interested, she just did not interview, could not interview because of the conflict.
Okay, I didn't get the memo or email
No
on that.
problem,
The
no
email
problem.
that I got said that she withdrew.
You had a computer desk for a while, so you maybe missed.
Oh, for the last month.
Yeah.
Okay, so in any event.
And then don't forget, we had a fellow who really preferred the HPB was his first choice, but we put him on the Art Center board because that was his second choice, and we were short of candidates for the Art Center board.
Well, it's my thought that we're at a place in the process where we may need to do what we did last year, when we had an opening occur on the Energy and Environment Commission after we thought we were done with the process, and we held interviews for about an hour in the senior center and made an appointment at the next meeting. So if we are out of candidates, that's what I would recommend.
I don't think we are, though. We have someone who's interested, may not be the first choice, but they're interested in the Art Center board. We have 2 candidates interested in the HPB. So we have a pool, and they've already went through that extensive process, and I think we should at least recognize that by having a discussion and making our, and if not at that point, then maybe.
Well, my concern is if we had a process in which people interviewed and someone, for whatever reason, couldn't interview, and we did have people interview in February who couldn't interview in January, I'm uncomfortable appointing somebody whom we have not interviewed over somebody who was interviewed. That's one of my concerns.
So could we bridge that by having a quick interview with this party and then having the discussion and then making the decision? Would that bridge the gap? Would that be fair?
It's a possibility.
Given what we've set up for a practice and how well we have followed it and how well it has worked for us, I would prefer to do that than to appoint someone who has not gone through that process.
I think that's a valuable consideration.
All right. Maybe the first thing we should do is ask our clerk to confirm that we need to do that interview. I mean, it may be that we have a sufficient pool of candidates here and available that we do not have to conduct an interview of somebody else. But assuming that we do, we could certainly do it on a 10-minute basis before a council meeting.
I think it's not so much whether technically we need to, it's about the appearance of equity to all the applicants and to the process, that we follow the same process for every applicant. I think that's what Member Bennett was.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we appoint somebody we haven't interviewed. I'm just wondering whether or not we have enough candidates available that we have interviewed that we can make these appointments. I'm not sure.
We do.
So then where's the inequity, I guess, is what I'm getting to, if we've interviewed them.
We certainly could make appointments right now with people we have interviewed.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
We could.
Must someone have an interview to be considered to fill a slot?
Do you have a suggestion you want to make?
To be fair, well, what I'm saying is, we could make appointments to both the Art Center Board and the Heritage Preservation Board out of individuals who have been interviewed and have interest in each of those. So we have one individual where Heritage Preservation Board was number 1, his primary interest, and we have one individual where the Art Center Board was her secondary interest. So we certainly could fill those 2 positions now.
But could I see those, please?
Mm-hmm.
Without naming names here.
Yep.
So is one required to be interviewed to be appointed? Is that our condition precedent?
I think, to be fair,
Go ahead, I'm asking a question.
I believe, to be fair, that's the process that we've established to the point where we were able this year to, and I believe last year, to do catch-up interviews. But this year we deliberately set up an evening to accommodate a couple of people who could not make the interview schedule in January, in addition to other candidates.
And was the one person who could not interview told that they needed to schedule a makeup?
If they had not been interviewed, their application would not have been considered this year. They were told at one point they did not think they were going to be able to. So they made that interview on that night, as well as some people who are asking for reappointment.
Then that's the equitable thing to do. And we have 2 candidates, so we're.
we do.
Yep.
How about we ask the clerk to make sure there's still interested, and then you put them on the agenda with their names for next time. May I
Okay.
suggest that?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay?
I think that's
Do you
important.
need the list
Yeah.
of names?
She has them.
Okay.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that the person that was interested in HPB wasn't on another board already.
Right.
Okay.
He is not.
And to be clear, what my concern about process, it was if we felt that we did not have matching people with abilities to boards or commissions. The idea that if we are at a point in process where we feel that we need a different skill set, that reopening of the application process, I think, is the fair thing to do, if that's the point that we feel that we're at.
Okay.
And our goal, unfortunately, our goal, though, a year ago, that when Member Sprague wasn't here, is that if we had candidates, we chose from them, and if an opening came later than that, we then held it open until the next application period, which would be 9 months from now. So, every time there's an opening to start interview and start notice, it's a lot going on. It's confusing to our constituents. It's better if we just let them know, apply in December, we'll interview you in January, we'll make our appointments in February.
There you go. All right.
Sorry.
All right, let's get a confirmation from the clerk. And if we have to then go to an interview process, we will. Otherwise, we'll appoint from the pool that we have. All right, good. Thanks for that good discussion. Spring flooding update. Director Houle.
Your Honor, if I could, I'd like to give Mr. Houle a brief preamble while things are getting set up. We think this is an important presentation for the council tonight because I think, as most of us know, there is an impending threat that we know is coming our way with spring flooding, and we want to make sure that we're all on the same page with regards to what the city will do and won't do with regards to protecting private property, and that's what we're here to make sure we know, because when it does come, you will no doubt receive calls. Some may be frantic and fearful, and we want to make sure that we don't put you in a bad spot, and vice versa, so that we're here tonight to get that kind of feedback from you as well. So, Mr. Houle.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Manager Neal. Council and Mayor and Council, what I'd like to do is kind of give you where we're at with the spring flooding preparation. I do have Jesse Struve here also, that's been with me with the watershed districts, meeting with them. What I'd like to cover is what the flood potential is in the city, and that's being updated weekly. Pretty soon it'll probably be closer to daily by the watershed districts. We just got a new update from the Minnehaha Creek one that's in the back of your packet. We'll also cover a little bit of the action plan that Public Works and the other public safety folks are taking in the city, sandbag procedures, and then contact information. The flooding factors. Last fall, if you recall, we had a pretty wet fall, which really saturated the soils right up to freeze up essentially. In fact, the dam out in Lake Minnetonka, they had a tough time closing the dam because of the ice that accumulated on the dam because they'll drop the lake down to a certain point in anticipation of a spring melt. And what happened was the lake, with all the water that was running into that drainage area, they let it go to the last minute. And then even after that, it came up when the ice was coming up. We had as you know, driving around the city, it's hard to still see around the snowbanks. I don't recall after the state high school hockey tournament ever having that issue before. But so we have a lot of snowpack in the city. And then we have a potential for a quick thaw and a spring rainfall. We had a rainfall event today that just adds to that moisture sitting on top of the ground. And we anticipate some additional rainfall events here within the next 5 days. Flood potential, the Minnehaha Creek and 9 Mile Creek watershed districts have performed hydrologic modeling of each creek. What they basically do is they look at what the snow melt is, or the snow amount is out there, and what type of moisture that they predict is in the snow melt. And they also look at essentially a 10-day melt period, and then they tack onto that a typical 2.5 or 2.4 inch rainfall event, which is a pretty large rainfall event, but that has occurred in late March, early April, basically. So we're looking at the worst case scenarios, or one of the worst case. Both of the watershed districts, not only the Minnehaha Creek, but also 9 Mile has a good potential for flooding in both of those portions. The modeling that they have done, we've then taken that, given it to our stormwater engineers, Bar Engineering, that has done the modeling of our surface plan, and then they've put that into the surface plan to see where the worst areas are, would potentially be. And then we'll also, part of that was to identify the at-risk properties that have a better potential of being vulnerable. So we've identified the at-risk properties. We've created a web page that I'll show you in just a second that the residents can go to find out information and keep track of what's happening. We've calculated from the at-risk properties the amount of sandbags that the city is going to need. And right now we calculate about 26,000 sandbags. The updated modeling of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District is we're anticipating more, so we're going to be ordering up some more. Right now they are available from our source, and actually it's a source that the residents can also go to also. We're basically going through all of our equipment, our springtime equipment, making sure all of our pumps are operable, our lift stations on the stormwater, lift stations that do draw down different lakes and such are operable. We're also going to be, within the next week or so, well, actually end of this week, I believe, we're going to be starting to pump down Highland Lake a little bit, and we're also going to be looking at Hawks Lake to help reduce the flood risk. So some of these lakes that do have skating rinks on them, we're going to be going door to door, giving flyers, telling them that their skating days are over, which are probably going to be over this weekend anyway, the 50-degree temps. And then with the other item that we need to make sure that we're not missing, and at the very first Minnehaha Creek watershed meeting that we had, I did invite the Met Council there for their metropolitan services, sanitary sewer system, to be sure that they're in tune to the potential flooding along the creeks, because that's where most of their trunk lines run. So we're also looking at our sanitary sewer system and overlaying that to be sure that so people don't get flooded overland, but then they don't get flooded with the sewers that we had back in '97. Sandbag procedures. As you can imagine, once everything starts melting, and like Manager Neal said, the press will be on to not the press, but the press will be on to get sandbags for your homes and protect your homes. So we've actually have identified at-risk properties that will be made available on the website, and if folks can't call in, we can show those tonight too. We weren't going to go through all of them at this time. But the at-risk properties, what we'll do is part of that 26,000 sandbags is that we'll have enough for the at-risk properties and enough for the ones that we would consider at-risk properties. Since there's so many of them and we're at limited staff, is that we're proposing to put them on pallets, calculate the amount of sandbags that we feel that home or property would need, and deliver them to their front yard or to their driveway, and then they would have to coordinate getting those sandbags to their backyards. We will offer our services from an engineering point of view to help guide where they place those sandbags and the proper technique to place the sandbags with the plastic liner that you need to put on the ground first, and then wrap your sandbags in. We'll give them the proper advice. Then once the event is done, and hopefully this will be short-lived, so homeowners will be responsible to remove and restack the sandbags on the pallets. Once again, we do not have the staff to go and remove all the sandbags and bring them back up to the roadway, and then we'll just haul them away. The filling of sandbags will take place at our old Public Works facility. What we'll do is in the front part of that parking lot tomorrow, we'll be dropping off some sand and some sandbags for the non-at-risk homeowners that can go and fill up the sandbags. We do ask them to sign a waiver, at that one. At the at-risk homeowners, our staff will be filling. We started today filling in the back the old salt shed basically. We'll be filling there all week, probably until the event is done essentially. The main sandbagging hours, like I say, in the front portion, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. is that where we anticipate having it open to people to stop by if they want to pick up a sandbag or two over there. Some of the other things that people should really kind of look at, what their past history of their home, if they've lived in their home a number of years, what's a past history. 87 is sort of similar, but it really isn't. That came all at once. It's not the snow melt that they're looking at having. And a lot of what the emergency folks are in Minnesota are worried about is not so much of the main rivers. They know those are going to flood, but it's going to be the low-lying flat areas in the state that they're worried about. Some areas that they haven't seen flood before. So that's where we ask people to take a look at their properties, and if they can, on a block, if they have a low area and they can get a submersible pump and pump it out themselves out to the curb lines, that's probably a nice remedy. I've seen different blocks of neighbors go together on a pump like that, take care of their own issue. The information, if you go to the City of Edina, actually we'll put the actual website on here, but all the contact information should go through Jesse Struve. We have his number here, 903-5713, or his email contact, and then he'll route the calls from there. What I'd like to show you here is the website that we've set up, or web page, I guess, that Jennifer spent most of yesterday evening working on. Thank you for us. Basically, it kind of covers the what I've said in the presentation here, and then at the bottom here, it also has the at-risk areas that you have here. We'll actually have links, so when they pull this up, that they can click on that, and it'll show a map. That would be just one of those. Essentially, it's going to show. Maybe you can just toggle between this. Actually, I'll just. Is this? So essentially, what it'll show is a map like this. What you're seeing on this particular one is 70th Street and 9 Mile Creek through here, and we've identified a couple at-risk homes. If toggle back to the web page there. So essentially, that's what this part of the website would be, and those will be available up here at City Hall too. We'll have these maps at Lynette's desk, and we'll also have them down at Public Works also. And then we also have other links back to the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District and then 9 Mile Watershed District, back to FEMA and such like that. The other item that we have is a, whoops, we've timed out, is this interactive stormwater surface. And actually we hadn't really released this from our surface plan because we're still going through the approval process. But we've pulled this up, and we've actually okay. What will happen is it'll pull up, and you can actually zoom right into your property to look at that. So, not sure if I. But anyway, that's where we're at with the planning measures at this point. Like I say, if you route all the residents, if they call you for sandbags or whatever, route them to Jesse's number, and Jesse will contact them and route them in the correct direction.
The last time we had some flooding, there's a drain that goes into Minneapolis, kind of. Is it by France or the cemetery, or on the other side of the cemetery, that often gets filled up with brush and stuff, and that caused some backup before?
Yeah, we've looked at all the culverts. We've looked at the streams to be sure that there's no fallen debris basically that could float up and go in the culverts. So the item that we'll be watching is the ice. So if we have a quick melt and you get the ice dams, we're prepared to scoop down and remove those ice dams.
So you'll be looking at them, whether it's ice or whether it's something else that tends to block right there.
Right. And there was one that was a number of years back that we actually had to send some divers in to remove. It's up on 40th and France Avenue.
Thanks.
We've got a couple spots where the storm drains in the street are still completely covered over with ice. And so on a day like today and a day like tomorrow, it's going to be, because the snow isn't from curb to curb at that location. And the water is going to be deep, and you're driving through it between the piles of snow. So, and it is solid ice. So I don't know what can be done about that, but there are situations like that going on in our neighborhood anyway.
If you have that, contact our utility department, and
Okay.
we've been opening up catch basins since the January thaw. So we should be out there with our front-end loaders and opening up the catch basins so that they actually can flow. Yep.
Other questions? Good. This is nice to have this information out for our public, both on the website as well as being able to access this meeting and seeing your report. So I think the last time I needed sandbags, I was living in a different house over on Sunnyside, but I remember the city was very cooperative in helping us get a few sandbags delivered, and then we installed them ourselves with your guidance, and I'm sure the same thing will happen again, and it will be very effective in helping residents. So that's good. Good preparation.
And did you get a response from MnDOT on the Gleason 62 road as far as patching those holes?
No, I have not yet. It's high on my list to recontact them and find out.
I don't know why, but
that
that corner seems to hit a lot of people, because I probably had
Right.
3 or 4 people now say, what are they doing? And I keep saying it's MnDOT, it's not us, but, okay.
It's gone beyond third world over there. Jesse? All right.
I just had
Jesse, do you
the-
want to step up here for a moment and introduce yourself so that Member Bennett had the idea that people ought to be able to put a face to a name.
Yeah, I'm Jesse Struve. I'm the utility engineer. I'm familiar with most of you up here as well. So, yeah, any resident that gives you a call, direct them to me. I'll get back to them as promptly as I can, and we'll hopefully address any concern they have.
Good. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. All right. Community comment. Anyone in the audience wish to comment about anything? Either of our two erstwhile reporters back there? No. Just kidding. All right. Anything in the way of correspondence and petitions that we didn't have on the dais?
No.
All right. Good. Mayor and council comments. I think we might have started last time with Member Brindle. Member Sprague.
Wonderful. Just looking for an announcement I wanted to read here. A few events coming up, I think of interest to the community. The Parent Communication Network has an event coming up Monday, March 21st, so next week, 7 to 9 p.m. at Southview Middle School Auditorium. It's called Dare to Be Real, a community discussion on racial diversity. And it's talking about how racial differences can impact a kid's school experience. And it's also taking a look at some of the best practices developed by Southview to minimize the differences created by race and to generate broader acceptance and tolerance. So I think it's a pretty important discussion to follow if you're available. Next, there's a forum on youth homelessness in suburbia, Saturday, April 30th, 9 to 12 at the Bloomington Civic Plaza. It's sponsored by Oasis for Youth, and it's talking about homelessness, including those precariously housed, those youth that are precariously housed, meaning they're couch hopping and they're kind of on the verge of being homeless as well. There's going to be a panel discussion with social workers and community service organizations, including one social worker from Edina High School. There also will be a testimonial from an actual Edina homeless youth. And Member Bennett and I met with Oasis for Youth today to talk about how we can develop a home network here in Edina. I'm going to let her comment a little bit more about on that as well as whom to contact. The Grandview District Small Area Plan kickoff meeting is April 14th here in the council chambers, 7 p.m. There's also another meeting April 21st, 7 p.m. at the Senior Center. So for anyone out there in the community that wants to get involved, this is just an incredible opportunity to volunteer and to be involved in a very strategic planning process. One of our consent agenda items was the installation of the solar panel, the grant, and I just wanted to take a minute to commend the staff and the Energy and Environment Commission for bringing this initiative forward. I think it's important that Edina become an early adopter of this technology and transition from being strictly an energy consumer to being an energy producer. I think the early experience with the technology is going to benefit us greatly for future applications, and of course there are some great educational benefits. So it's just, I'm excited we're putting our stake in the ground to be a leader in sustainability. Talking of innovation, I wanted to show a couple graphics here. I did some training at City Hall to get familiar with departments and what they do, and one of the persons I met with was Matt Sisterman, who's the IT director, and he talked about the fiber optic network and the upgrades. So here you see a graphic. This is the fiber optic network in 2006, pre-upgrades, and the next slide will show you the current situation. What was amazing to me is the fiber optic network allows you to download documents 667 times faster than the current T1 lines, or than the previous T1 lines. I just imagine how that has an impact on the productivity of our staff, and it must, it's an incredible infrastructure improvement. The other thing it does is it saves the city $2,000 a month in service charges to our previous providers, and $15,000 a year in maintenance expenses, because now our Public Works Department can help maintain the fiber optic lines. So that's a savings of about $40,000 a year. So on my calculations, this improvement pays for itself in about 10 years. So again, that's getting back to this theme of cost-effective public infrastructure. I think that largely fits the bill. And then finally, I wanted to talk about, I'm so excited that we have a survey coming back to the city. A great survey for any survey nerds out there. I am one self-proclaimed survey nerd. And there's a great survey I read a couple of years ago. Just Google Rockville, Maryland survey, citizen survey, and it will come up. And it goes in great detail in its questioning. And one of the statements in there as to why they're doing these surveys was really struck home with me. It said the results will be used as part of a data-driven accountability system to improve the organizational efficiency and effectiveness of city government. And that is the direction I believe the city is going in. It's important that we have concrete performance measures and that we can, constantly improve. And this is a very important device to manage that improvement. So I just want to commend Manager Neal for taking this upon himself in his early tenure to get this initiative off the ground. And I hope that we can do it more frequently than every 12 years. Hopefully it will be a biannual event. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Swenson.
A couple things. I had a mom call. She tried to sign 2 kids up for a summer program. Apparently we have a system that doesn't have a shopping cart. Okay, so if we ever go for an upgrade, could we add a shopping cart? Because I think that's our customers' normal experience. So when she didn't realize she didn't get her second child in, now she has a child with no daycare while younger brother is at the park. It's sort of a mess. And it's probably something that we need to look forward to in the future and just try to link as many of our summer programs together so that families can really make plans for the summer in not a disjointed fashion. I was going to propose kind of a spin-off to the decision resources information gathering, but more on a more casual idea. We have so many of our realtors that specialize in Edina. I would like to propose maybe the end of April, beginning of May, that we just have a breakfast with the ones that really specifically bring people into Edina or relocate them into Edina. And that focus really is what are they selling to these people that Edina would give them, whether it's a family, no family, what it is that these people are requesting. And when they come into our community and look at it, what makes them buy and what makes them maybe not buy? Or what do they hear we're missing and we could improve? It's kind of a piece of information in addition, a focus group. Not a big deal. I've talked to Manager Neal, and he seemed to support the idea. At least he was kind enough to say yes.
That's a good idea.
Okay, thanks. So, and my knee will be done by the end of April, I'm hoping. So I'm wait to do it until then because I want to be part of it. And just thinking of breakfast at Braemar, and so I don't know how we organize it, but if the rest of you are on board with it, I'd like to be able to do it.
Good thought.
Can I also say it might be an opportunity for us to deliver some materials to the realtor community, whether it's Come Home to Edina program or whatever materials are available.
Oh yeah, I think we can have it there, but what I really want to get out of this is I want them to tell us what they hear, just even if it's anecdotally. I think it's important information, and there's certainly a strong group of people that we really need to tap.
Okay, good. Thank you. Member Bennett.
Thank you. Well, Member Sprague gave me an intro to talk briefly about Oasis for Youth, which is an organization that was started in July of 2010 by members of the community who were concerned about this issue of youth who were losing homes or, as Member Sprague put it, are precariously housed. What we are learning about Edina through the work that they are doing is that the cause of most of youth precarious housing in Edina tends to be family instability. In other communities, it can be loss of homes to foreclosure. Here, it tends to be more family circumstances, and for some of these youth, it is circumstances that have perhaps been going on for years. There is a drop-in center that operates at Oak Grove Presbyterian Church, which is housing Oasis for Youth at this point. That is open from 2:30 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and offers a variety of services, including intake to overnight shelter and referrals to other shelter programs, referrals to counselors for family and individual counseling, on-site laundry and shower facilities, computer internet access for school or job hunting, personal hygiene products, clothing, tutoring assistance, educational program and social activities, an evening meal at a community center a block away, and a safe, comfortable, and friendly place to rest. They are looking for volunteers. They will train volunteers. There is a screening process. They are working with other established organizations in the greater community that have been serving youth for years, such as The Bridge in Minneapolis and also Avenues for Homeless Youth. So from my contact, my introduction today, I'm really favorably impressed. I think they are starting their work, and I think they're doing it in a very deliberate, mindful way. Their contact information is www.oasisforyouth.org. And Andrea Knoll, who's a parent in our community, can be reached at 612-751-1515. Again, 612-751-1515. I also had a request for sharing of information in an interval of time in which my computer has been working. I finished the inventory of sidewalks that I had started before our joint meeting with the ETC. It dates back to 1999. I used the 1999 comprehensive plan and the 2008 comprehensive plan update as guides, also the annual achievement reports that have been prepared by the Public Works and Engineering Department. We had one on in our packet for this week. That also, and then the feasibility study and other staff reports that I have collected in my 4+ years. So we're available. There's cost information, how the sidewalk was paid for and what the assessments were. And I'm going to ask that Manager Neal send that electronically to council members. It's in a PDF document. And finally, one of the calls that I received in this last week, and I think others might have as well, was about traffic generated by the Parade of Homes. And the question was what we as a community can do to residents who are seeking balance in their neighborhoods. And I'm going to defer to Manager Neal.
And I may as well defer to our city attorney. We did pose this question to Mr. Knutson this past week and learned that the Parade of Homes does not violate any of our existing ordinances. You hear from time to time of cities that try to take on that issue, and some do try to regulate it. But Mr. Knutson, do you want to make any additional comments on that?
The primary issue I've heard about Parade of Homes and similar activities over the years is signage. And I haven't heard anything about signage in Edina concerning them. But that's probably the only issue people try to regulate. I mean, you can regulate parking and stopping of cars.
What would be the signage regulations that would be applicable?
I'm speaking generally, and I don't know what in Edina. For example, some communities prohibit placing signage on the boulevards or on utility poles. And sometimes some organizations ignore that and place them on where they don't belong. Mm-hmm. But I have not heard any complaints or anything about that issue in Edina.
I don't think it was signage as much as traffic and parking, and I did notice that at least the Mirror Lakes house, across from Versailles, or the sort of
Mirror Lane house.
Mirror Lane house, that had no parking temporarily signed on one side, but it still made the road not passable to two people easily if you were going. And I didn't realize it was Parade of Homes, and I went in there to find another home that I was going to put up for historical preservation, and I regretted driving down that street.
And the resident was not concerned about the sales activities of homes in the community. The concern was more about homes that are already sold and that are on the tour more as marketing. And again, it sounds like we do not have any restrictions on that.
We do not at this time.
But I think Member Swenson made the point that we are actively, we are aggressive about parking signage.
Absolutely.
And where parking is allowed and where it is not allowed.
That is correct.
And
we will enforce parking.
That may tend to get abused. I know that I was up on Mirror Lane because my wife wanted to see that parade home of all parade homes. Apparently, that was the kind of the signature parade home. I don't know what some special name for it, but there were some pretty prolific violation of the parking signs that have been put up by the police department. So
I would also say we're aggressive on signage because I don't see any real estate signage stuck in the ground, other than temporary open house signs ever. I've never seen a directional sign or anything in the city, so I think we're doing a good job on that as well.
Okay, Member Brindle.
I don't have much. Attended a visioning session yesterday for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail. And a group of us, we've had a vision that's kind of been a little clumsy and a little wordy. And so we had a great time working through that. It's a very exciting connection and addition to the light rail network, and one that is going to move people from where they live downtown Minneapolis to their job in the Southwest and vice versa. So it'll be more commuter probably than either of the Hiawatha or the Central. So it's very exciting.
Thank you. Member Bennett, I ran into her at the Morningside Bungalow Study Open House, which I think was on the 9th. Had a good turnout on the 8th. You were here earlier than I was, and I think there was a pretty good turnout for folks coming to look at the designated properties.
Several owners.
So it's a very interesting study done by the Heritage Preservation Board. On the morning of the 9th, which was then Wednesday, 494 Corridor Commission had Representative Mike Beard, who's the current chair of the House Transportation Policy Committee, speak. And it was an interesting discussion about his views on mobility. A couple of things that were particularly interesting that came out of his mouth. One was that he is proposing, as he says, yarding or parking the rail projects for 2 years. He's at least not an expressed fan of light rail, and that may have some implications relative to the Southwest Corridor, and he did indicate that if we could prove to him that it was an investment with a decent return and not a subsidy, that he would be willing to look strongly at recommending some participation by the legislature with some funding. And there is some study money being requested from the state legislature on that. Important issue for all of us. And then with respect to the Dan Patch line, which runs through our community, there has been a ban on studying that Dan Patch line for purposes of commuter or intercity rail. He also mentioned that he favored, from a public policy standpoint, getting rid of that ban so that at least folks could start to think about studying that line and its possibilities with respect to some sort of rail movement. There's already freight rail movements on that line. But now we'd have to look at commuter rail or intercity rail possibilities, which we've had some discussion with Dave Christensen on from MnDOT. So those are some things. And then I was with him again the next night. We had the 169 Corridor Coalition group over at the state legislature, met with Representative Beard and representatives and senators from Mankato all the way to Edina. None of our folks from Edina showed up. We had a good discussion again there with some of the legislators with regard to legislative priorities, and he reiterated again his viewpoint of light rail. We had the last night was the Community Dome open house. Manager Neal has reported out on that at least once, I think, to us about some activities there. The activities continue. They are looking for a place that they could at least ostensibly build a dome. That'll be something that we may see in the months to come unless they do it purely on school district property. But I suspect that they'll be coming to us with some ideas that they may have at some point in time. And then on the 26th of April is a dialogue on bullying that the Human Rights and Relations Commission is doing, and I can't recall if it's at Braemar or the location of it. Does anybody recall? Edina High School. Okay, good. And then on something I just passed out to you folks earlier, and I think it's something that we need to consider acting on tonight. I hate to do this without having it go through the Energy and Environment Commission. But as you can see, there's two documents that I've circulated. One is a description of what is called the pilot within a pilot. As you all know, we're part of the Green Step Cities project, which involves Edina, Bloomington, St. Louis Park, Falcon Heights, and Victoria, looking at ways to improve ourselves environmentally, and our Energy and Environment Commission has worked aggressively on this. The goal of this project within a project is to estimate the energy value and greenhouse gas emissions associated with citywide energy consumption. And they would look at the prior 2 years, 08 and 09, and then establish a process for measuring at least 2 years on a going forward basis. We'd be measuring actual city outcomes. The project would measure electricity, natural gas, and water consumption and the associated greenhouse gas emissions. This is a project that's being funded in part by ULI, and then the consultants are billing ULI. ULI would theoretically bill us if we get involved in this. It would be an actual billing to us. The cost would be $5,000 to participate in this pilot within a pilot within the Green Step Cities project. As Member Sprague said, putting a stake in the ground with respect to our solar panels that we put on the roof. This is all part of this environmental work that we're doing. As I recall, the Energy and Environment Commission has been looking for some software, looking at some specific software that would accomplish these same sorts of purposes, and it's running in the $40,000 range. This is an absolute bargain in relative terms. The work being done by experienced consultants for the cost of to the city of $5,000. The reason that it has some urgency to it is because they want to have all the cities in place by the 15th of April to get this work done, and we don't really have time to send it to the Energy and Environment Commission unless we can get an answer back from them by the 5th of April, which is our next meeting. So I wanted to bring it to the council's attention so we could at least talk about this. The pilot within a pilot program and the ULI want Edina included in this pilot within a pilot because we're part of the Green Step Cities program, and I think this would be the next logical step for us, is to actually figure out how to get our carbon footprint measured and then figure out how we're going to reduce the same. And this is something that I think we've been working on for several years now. This is a great opportunity to get that all tightened up, get the work done at a reasonable cost. And I just wanted to bring it to the council's attention tonight. It would be, I think, good if we could act on it yet this evening. I don't know if the Energy and Environment Commission can get a response back to us by the time of our next meeting, but if we, I think for sure if we delay it beyond the 5th of April, we will not be a participant in this because there are a limited number of spots available for the pilot within the pilot. So we need to, I think at the latest, act by the 5th of April. I was told yesterday that we had to act with some urgency here, and so that's the reason I bring it up with you all tonight. Member Bennett.
I would really prefer to have a read on this from the Energy and Environment Commission. I know that they have looked at this in the past. I know that Commission member Germana Paterlini has worked with modeling before. I know that there was some evaluation of the city's usage that I think had to be done with ICLEI. So basis all of that and my lack of understanding of or lack of ability to summarize that for you now, I would really prefer to have a more orderly review of it by the commission charged, even if they need to set a special meeting. I can see from the calendar that it looks like they've held their March meeting. Right.
Special meeting, or could a working group take this on? That's a little, they have a little more flexible schedule where we could have the energy working group. It used to be alternative energy, now it's energy working group. Give some comment back, and then we could act on it in a timely fashion.
Member Sirks and I did, from the Energy and Environment Commission, did meet with the consultant about 3 weeks ago, and then this just came to me today. So the information we got from the consultant was very good. I think Member Sirks favors getting this done this way as opposed to looking at this $40,000 software. But I perfectly understand if people want to have the Energy and Environment Commission opine on this, but we need to act with urgency on this. Yeah.
Your Honor, I don't like to step on the proposal because it's something we need to do, but I'm thinking we may have already gotten started on this. We may have actually a fair amount of this done.
According to the consultant, we haven't got anywhere near the information pulled together that we need to pull.
During the last month and a half, well, I attended, I think, the February meeting of the EEC and talked a little bit about a project that I worked on with a former employer with a company called McKinstry & Associates. And we retained McKinstry to kind of take over the management of the solar project upstairs, to serve as the general contractor for getting that project spec'd out and out to bid and evaluate the bids and observe the construction and so on. And I talked to the EEC about that before going forward with that. Part of their analysis was to come in and do analysis on all of our facilities, and they have produced a report, and I have sent that report to the EEC, and they actually reviewed it at their last meeting. And it may cover a fair amount of what we're looking at here. I just don't have access to it tonight to look at it. But
Well, that would be terrific if this was covered. I just don't want to miss this opportunity.
Can't we put it on the agenda for the beginning of April? And we could ask two things. We could ask Manager Neal to get feedback from Energy and Environment, and if they need to have a working group before that meeting of the energy one, then I think,
Their option.
yep, Member Sprague's idea is good, but that at least we get feedback from more than just one person there, since there seems to be a little confusion as to what we've collected and what we haven't.
I'd like to have feedback from the entire group if we could get it, and if they need to have a special meeting between now and the 5th of April, you know, I think we could probably.
That's the advantage, though, of the working group, too, isn't it? Is that they specify in certain areas, and that's, so do you want the whole group, or do you just need the working group that specializes in this area?
I guess if it requires some action on their part, I'd like to have the whole group opine on whether or not this is something that they think we should be doing.
Might they have a quorum, this is from Communications Director Bennerout, might they have a quorum at our Board and Commissions hoedown next week?
Oh, the Monday night event?
Yes, correct.
Centennial Lakes, where we
The board,
the new members
yes,
and
the Commissioner's Ball, at the Commissioner's Ball, yes. But might that be an opportunity, you know, to facilitate a quick meeting, duly noticed with a quorum?
Possible. It's hard to know how many of them will show up.
If not, if we get a working group opinion that's satisfactory, plus Manager Neal's additional.
Well, and to facilitate any kind of productiveness on the night of the Board and Commission dinner, perhaps it could be sent out to all of them electronically with chance to review, and even receiving comments back could start a
the
process.
McKinstry study has already. They all have it.
Okay.
They've had comments. They've had discussion on it. I'm meeting with a couple of them next week on a couple of different points from that study.
I'd like to move that we call it the hoedown as well. Maybe just change the title, have a little square dancing, and
this.
I think there's a failure to have a second, sorry.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, you call it whatever you want. Just be there. All right. Direction clear. We'll get a working group decision on this, and then you can look at it as well. I think I sent it to you electronically, so you can forward it on. It's good. And then I will try to convince the consultant to wait a bit. I think they were looking for a decision from us before the end of the month, but I'll tell them we can't make a decision until the 5th of April. See if they'll wait for us.
Decision till April 15th. I think it said, isn't it?
That's it for me. Oh, I had one other thing in the context of what Member Bennett was talking about, the Oasis for Youth. There are two women, one from Edina, one from Bloomington, that are sisters, Karen McElrath and Leslie Stiles, that are working with kids that are having trouble at home, that just decide that it's not a good place to be on a particular night or consecutive nights and need a place to stay. We should figure out how to connect Oasis for Youth to them. And I don't remember the name of the organization that they put together, but I think, no, Karen McElrath, who was Doug McElrath's wife, and then this Leslie Stiles in Bloomington. I think they have a place to shelter kids that are having a problem at home down in Bloomington, but let me do some checking on that. All right, good. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. A few things. We have been kind of, at least informally, dealing with a couple of different economic development opportunities. Those opportunities are interesting but informal at this point. There are a couple policies, though, that we do not have in place that we ought to before we give really serious consideration to participating in economic development ventures. One of those policies is a business subsidy policy, and one is a tax increment financing policy. We're pulling together some examples of those two policies. I'm going to put together recommendations on both of them and get them out to you prior to the April 5th meeting, so you have a chance to take a look at it. And I'll try to indicate some points upon which council has some discretion. We have been staff, and I'll say staff in police and Deb Mangan's office, we have been receiving an increased level of feedback from people who are interested in potentially having the council look at changing our liquor ordinance. And some of that is direct input that they're interested in us taking a look at it, and some of it is just the behavior that they violated on a regular basis. And there is an event coming up at 50th in France by the end of the month that has had some issues in the past with compliance with our liquor control ordinance, and we're going to enforce the ordinance as they are written until you change them. So I think there are some areas in our liquor ordinance that we should take a look at, and we'll try to put together a briefing for you on those.
Can't you ask that as a question of decision resources?
We do ask a couple of liquor questions.
Not as direct.
Not as direct as that, but
I mean, we did it by referendum the first time.
we had a session yesterday, a 3-hour session yesterday, and a 3-hour session tomorrow with the managers of our enterprises as we kind of prep our business plans for the April 5th work session. I think you're going to find them to be more kind of filled out than what you've seen in the past. There is a thing that I'm wanting to establish called a Communications Advisory Committee. I see this as a group that we would solicit from the community to give us input on our communications tools and practices and strategies. Not something that is a full-fledged commission that takes a fair amount of care and nurturing, but something more than just a focus group that we hear from and dismiss. I've used the advisory tool kind of thing before, and I found it has been a way to collect feedback from the community, particularly skilled feedback or technical feedback that we wouldn't ordinarily get. So I think we're interested in getting that kind of feedback on what we do here and how to communicate. The Park Board has reviewed the proposed operations and RFP. They looked at it at their last meeting. There were some questions and some proposed amendments to it. So they will be looking at it again at their April meeting and potentially approving it there. I have, since I have come here, had a chance to put kind of fresh eyes on your agendas, on our agendas. And at the, my bad. And I have a proposal to you just from a fresh perspective about how we could make some potential changes to our agenda. And this is this is a draft. I'm not expecting any action by the council on this tonight, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of explanation about kind of what the rationale is and for some of the changes. And some of this, of course, is just based on my own experience and what I'm comfortable with, and that's not why we should adopt any particular format for an agenda. It should be something that you're comfortable with. My proposal in summary is to move community comment from the end of the agenda to a time prior to the start of the meeting. I would propose that time be off camera from 6:30 to 7. I think my experience is that you will find lots of people interested in talking to you who aren't necessarily comfortable being on camera, but there are some people that won't talk to you unless they can be on camera. You can decide the proportion of folks that talk to you. In terms of a meeting structure, What this meeting format is structured to do is to kind of get the perfunctory things, and I don't mean that in the sense that they're not important, but the quick things in the meeting, get to the point of those and move forward. So it takes in terms of a consent agenda, all of the items that are sort of throughout your agenda. And what you're looking at now is tonight's actual agenda reformatted into this new format. It takes all the consent agendas, which are items which are currently around the current agenda, and puts them in one place. It puts, again, like I said, the items that you can act on fairly quickly are items typically 1 through 6. And we don't have special recognitions and presentations all the time. But it does get you fairly quickly to the public hearings section of the agenda. Keeps the reports and recommendations section pretty much as is, and it moves the HRA function to the very end of the meeting. We typically don't have much in the way of HRA. Anyway, take a look at this. Let me know if you have comments about it, and I'd be happy to let you know what I think. But we won't be changing our format of our agenda. I think we have to do it by resolution. Is that right, Mr. Knudsen?
That's correct.
So if we do plan to do it and you want to do something like this or something different than this, let me know. We have a project.
Do you want to revisit this topic then at our next meeting?
I would like to, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's plan on it.
Okay. We have a project that is moving toward the council from the South Metro Public Safety Training Facility, which I think most of you know is a joint powers organization that we participate with the cities of Edina, Bloomington, and Eden Prairie, and the Metropolitan Airports Commission. There is a project that's been out there for a while called the 6th Floor Burner, which is a new burner that's on the top floor of the fire tower there. The project has been in the CIP of the training facility for probably since it was built, because that was an item that was desired in the original project but didn't make it because of budget cuts. The project has come down substantially in cost over the time since the since the building was initially constructed. It's now down to a cost of about $550,000, and the training center board and the firefighters and the operations committee folks would like to be able to go forward with this project. Our share of that project cost is 24%, Eden Prairie's is 35%, and Bloomington's is 41%. So Bloomington's share of that cost is $225,000, Eden Prairie's is $192,000, Edina's is $132,000. I'm just telling you this to give you a heads up that this is something that is important, I think is important to us. It's in a facility that's in our community. We are currently trying to figure out how we would finance that because it is not included in our city's CIP at this point.
Is it included in the other cities?
It is, I can't tell you whether it was or was. I doubt that it was, but both of the other 2 cities have already approved their funding to go forward with the project. We're still deciding how we could finance this. The fact that it's not in our CIP is something that I think ought to be influential to all of us as we decide. But I want to bring that back to you in April 5th too, hopefully with a solution that everybody can support.
Doesn't the MAC have any role in this?
The MAC Fire does not, because MAC's presence or partnership there is for their police only. Their fire have a separate training facility somewhere else.
All right.
Actually in Duluth. And finally, there's a major holiday this week on Thursday, but City Hall will be open that day. So just thought you should all know that. That's all I've got.
Going to wear your green tie again on Thursday? Or a different green tie?
Something else.
You mean you've become renamed O'Neill for the day?
That's part of my family heritage, yes. Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to mention one thing. One of the residents upstairs for our work session suggested that in conjunction with the processes that we intend to employ in conjunction with the Planning Commission, that we complete a flow chart of process, and that should be prepared and to make it clear what the role of each body is, covering things like notice, who is notified, what type of actions require what type of notification, public hearings, and I thought it was a good idea, and then that would be something that residents could easily access that aren't familiar with the ins and outs of the working of city government.
In other words, a map of the development process.
Yeah, that's another way to put it. So I'll just pass this note down to the city manager and ask you to take a look at that. So that's it. Anybody else have anything? All right, good. We stand adjourned.